Hey, y'all. How's everyone doing?
Hello.
Oh.
Hey, y'all.
Or wait, are we supposed to have our boxing
Yeah,
fists out?
that's my neck of the woods.
How's everyone doing? Just like
Doing all right.
thoughts
Doing
about Paul. So I kind of wanted to give a little bit of an opening statement. I will be moderating the debate. Oz will be hosting it. So lucky for y'all, Oz will be here. But before we get started, I wanted to say, this is for fun, right? This is for fun. This is not like a professional academic debate. If y'all watch these episodes, JeGaysus and I just shaded the fuck out of Paul. And then when I talked to Andrew, we did a little bit more of the sort of like historical breakdown, right? So this is for fun. And if y'all back either of my friends into an uncomfortable corner, you're going to get to deal with my bitch ass. So
and that does not mean do it on purpose if you have some kind of like pain kink. That's not
I will send you an invoice.
It would be fun to watch.
I will send you an invoice and I will embarrass you publicly. We want everyone to have fun, ask your questions, do whatever, but just like keep it cute. You know what I mean? As a side note, if anyone has questions about the videos or video that they saw of like that 5'4" king witnessing to JeGaysus at the American Atheist Convention, just save it to the end. You can ask us. We'll talk about it. And by we, I mean not me. Somebody else. You know what I mean? So on that note, we're just waiting for Correa and Oz to pop in when they're ready. Hey, DJ Ozzy Oz, what's up?
Really good timing.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, let's go. Okay, so just one quick piece of housekeeping. So I know that we said Captain DadPool is going to moderate tonight. So he had a really bad allergic reaction.
He's in the chat.
Yeah, he's saying like, I'm so sorry I wasn't able to moderate the debate. I'm having some medical issues. And like, you can even see in the TikTok that he made today that like it started and he said it's just gotten worse and worse and he's having trouble like, talking.
Sorry to jump in, but like I had this issue. I had an issue where like parts of my face were swelling up and then all of a sudden all of my face was swelling up and it was happening like every other day. And then it was every day. And when I went to the allergist, they were like, I don't know, nothing seems wrong. Nothing seems wrong? Like my face is swollen shut, bitch.
I look like I'm shooting a softball.
Oh, dude, it looked like I got someone just like held me down and beat the shit out of my face. Like it was, everything was swollen. So when you go to the allergist, press them because they might put you on some bullshit. Anyway, that's all I have to say. Just make sure that you press them. And also, if they won't do it, cut out processed food and then build it back in to see if you react to anything.
That's the hardest.
And it sucks.
One at a time.
And that worked. Yeah. So on that super exciting note, hey, Jenna, what's up?
Yeah, so I guess so Oz and I are going to be here like for in between the rounds to kind of give our insights or impressions about what is happening and maybe address some of the comments that we see. But for the most part, so we're did we go over the structure for the debate yet?
We can. No. So what we're going to do is the overarching theme here is, should we make Paul our dad? Or should we cancel him? Again, this is just for fun. We're going to do 5-minute openings. So each of you get a 5-minute opening statement. We will then have 5-minute and then rebuttal. Yeah. After that, we'll have 20 minutes of open dialogue. If you all start yelling over each other, which I doubt you will, I will step in.
I don't know. There's definitely drinking.
I think we'll be yellers. We are very much in love with each other, Andrew and I. You know, as two men will be who do podcasts together.
I don't know. This is a very gay debate.
It's
no
gonna
idea
be.
what's gonna happen.
It's gonna be.
After the 20 minutes of dialogue,
tactics, if I think I'm losing, like we'll just see what happens.
Hey, whatever. You know what? There's a lot of alcohol involved. After the 20-minute dialogue, we will do 10 to 15 minutes of question and answer, depending on how many questions we have. So if you have those questions and answers, please make sure you tag either myself or Correa.
Or you can do it
who you want.
Rachel. What? Oh my gosh, that would be horrible.
What?
Make sure you tag.
Oh, she said it's all the alcohol that he drinks. I bet
that was my first thought. Sulfates.
Listen, none of my business.
Allergies.
I call bullshit. I call bullshit.
Listen, shut up.
Okay, back on track.
So after the questions, then we will do 5-minute closing statements each. Y'all can vote if you're still like sober. Yeah, that's all I have for you.
Drinking
you
throughout
insolent children.
This is not meant to be sober.
Oh, I'm staying sober, so I'll have the hand up.
Look at Andrew is.
He has a mug.
He's
with the
so
jug.
prepared. If any of you saw the drunk shenanigans episode that I posted a couple weeks ago,
I couldn't get through it.
Dude, I couldn't watch myself be that stupid.
I was so embarrassed.
I haven't watched any of your attempts or actual Paul episode because I know I would probably be better at a debate if I knew what kind of material you were coming with, Andrew. But I was like, no, I want to be surprised. I want this to be straight, like off the cuff. I don't want to know what you're going to say.
Wait, you
That's
want
the first time you've been straight.
Yeah, I was like,
we're very serious.
We're talking about Paul.
Here.
It's not going to be straight.
Why don't we let Oz give a little opening statement since he's hosting and we're all just shit talking left and right? You know?
Well, yeah, and this
DJ Ozzy Oz.
Yeah, I'm excited for this. I've been looking
like the devil who made you.
Looking like the devil who created you.
Pam, I'm so glad that you enjoyed it because I almost didn't air that episode.
I had myself to sleep in shame, to be honest.
Wasn't her.
All right, Oz, take it away.
Well, welcome to the, I guess, Drunken Shenanigans, now the debate version, the debate edition, where Andrew and JeGaysus are going to debate on whether Paul was a piece of shit. Let's get it on.
A fight. All right, so this is what we're gonna do. I'm gonna pick a number between 1 and 10. Whoever is closest to that number is gonna start with their opening statement. Please hold. Okay, I've picked my number, Andrew.
Between 1 and 10, you said?
Yes.
6.
That was mine. Oh god.
Oh my god.
Oh, okay.
3.
All right, Andrew, you're going first. My number was 7.
Okay.
Yeah, so hold on. I'm gonna start the clock. Are you ready for your opening statement?
It's like a legit timer. Shit.
Oh,
okay.
you got 5 minutes.
Okay, well, I need to put a timer on for myself. Otherwise, I'll get nervous. Hold on.
And I did bring my Bible. I'm ready.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
I know I could bring my Bible. That might have been a good idea. Okay.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
3, 2, 1, go.
So I think that whenever we have conversations about Paul, we usually find some example of two extremes. One of the sides about Paul suggests that he is basically the dude who won the Bible. Like, he's the best dude since sliced bread. He's amazing. He's the greatest thing that happens in the Bible. And the other perspective is that, he's one of the worst maniacal creatures that could have ever gotten into power to help Rome do awful shit. Neither of those extremes is necessarily useful whenever we're going to have legitimate conversations about someone like Paul. The perspective that I would like to suggest for this conversation is that Paul is completely worthy of criticism, but we should criticize him correctly for what he does say that isn't helpful or doesn't, for what he says that is harmful or he doesn't, and leave him in that space without having to make up extra shit to make him seem worse than he actually was, or without having to ignore things that are problematic that he did legitimately say. Here's why I think Paul is valuable and is worth our consideration to set as a focal point for the New Testament church. And arguably not a total piece of shit. I'll throw that in. One, he is invaluable to acknowledging the way the early church came to function as a cohesive unit, or how it eventually became cohesive. The connection between early church Stoicism and Epicurean philosophy is primarily expressed through the writings of Paul in the Christian canon. The development of the church would not be able to have as good a historical resource if we did not pay attention to how Paul wrote. And whatever you think about Christianity, without his works, we wouldn't be able to examine and benefit from learning what we can about the most prevalent evangelist religion today. We also get the clearest example of early Christian rhetoric from Paul, early Christian preaching, and the structures of letters, how philosophy from the time of Plato and Aristotle eventually trickled into the space where we see rhetoric for the early church. We wouldn't have as clear an example as we do without Paul. We also see an example of the social dynamics of the church, the battles of ideology between the extremes of like James and Paul and Peter as more of a moderate. We wouldn't be able to see those without having Paul as a guidepost for those conversations. And also the world of Paul is the world the Gospels were written into. The people that assembled these Gospels and codified these stories would not, we would not know their thought process without Paul first. How am I doing on time?
2 minutes.
Cool. Also, to wholesale suggest that we should erase Paul or suggest that Paul is wholesale a piece of shit would allow us not to necessarily see the places and the communities that have taken Pauline literature and used it as outlets and conversation pieces for their liberation. While it is helpful to acknowledge that Paul has most certainly been used in problematic ways, it is also helpful to say that Paul has been used as a source of liberation for many as well. So to erase that by wholesale painting Paul as problematic limits our capacity to have good conversations about what Paul's literature has done for many. Also, if it weren't for the influence of authors like Augustine, we would not have some of the more toxic opinions of Paul that we seem to hold today. 1 minute?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So in closing, I would say that Paul is an invaluable outlet for us to understand the history of the church. He is the most educationally diverse figure in early church history, the first theologian of church history, without whom we would not have a clear picture of the early theology of the church the way that we do today, and who has been an outlet for a liberation theology for many communities, despite the errors that we find of him as a historical figure. He's worth our criticisms. Let's criticize him correctly instead of making up conspiracy theories as a way to
10 seconds.
exacerbate our feelings about him. The end.
The end. Well done. Excelente. I enjoyed that very much. All right.
Thank you.
Someone bring this man, JeGaysus, out here. Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm awake.
Are you ready?
No, I'm not. As I said,
Okay.
I'm going to be making this up as I go, so let's see what comes out of my mouth.
I love to see it. I am literally only on screen to be the time reminder.
That's okay.
So pay attention to JeGaysus only, and that's all. All right, are we good to go?
Yes. So I'm going to try my best not to rebuke any of Andrew's points and just talk about my stuff, because we're not into the rebuttals yet. But that's hard to do when he just came out here with such well-spoken eloquency.
What did you eloquency? It's my new favorite word.
Is that not a real word? See, this is
I
what
don't
you're
know.
about to get with me, people.
I thought eloquence was a word. Eloquency is fun. All right.
Okay.
I'm gonna do this. Okay.
I'm starting. Let me know so I
down.
can start my timer too.
3, 2, 1, go.
Okay, so first of all, thank you everyone for being here. As I said, I don't have any big speech prepared. I've had a huge weekend of being here and there and all over the place, so bear with me. A lot of you know me from TikTok, and you know that I have my little hashtag, cancel Paul, merch available in my store. And the reason why I like to say that is not just because he has problematic theology. It's not just because the name of Paul specifically has been used to go against women and gay people and queer people, and has even in some instances spurred slavery to remain. Those are all very good reasons, but they could of course be rebutted by the fact that, you know, a lot of the Pauline texts that we use were not Paul, and that they may have been fake and or written under his name by somebody close to him. Those are all great reasons, but one of the biggest reasons I say Paul is so problematic is because he is the example set forth of evangelicalism. He is what I would call the first evangelical, and the entire reason why the Christian church exists as it does today. The same Christian church that has martyred people, the same Christian church that has totally committed genocide on different groups of people. Without Paul and without his words and without the way, whether he wanted it or not, he's becoming part of Scripture, we would have saved so much suffering throughout the world. Then we have to look at the different facts that Paul is against sex. He's the one who spurred purity culture, not him. No, probably him, because he was very proud of his celibacy and he wanted everyone to be celibate. There's many different reasons why that has destroyed generations of people, as we, I'm sure, who have been in church know what purity culture can do. Outside of that, he is just insufferable as a person. And like on the lighthearted side of it, I just don't like insufferable people. I mean, in the Acts of Thecla, right? He would go out and he would preach for 3 days on end. Like, we don't need that. Paul plays all sides, and I don't trust him for that. He plays the Jewish side, and then he'll turn around and tell something very opposite to the Gentiles. He grew up as a Jewish scholar and knows exactly what the Hebrew scriptures would say, but then he'll say he has revelation, and therefore his trumps the Hebrew scriptures because it came from Jesus himself. The man never met Jesus, and yet the man claims to know everything Jesus would want you to know. So keeping that in mind, the fact that he not only contradicts the Hebrew scriptures, he directly contradicts Jesus in many places. That could be found within his actual books, the ones he wrote, as well as the fake Paul books. And Christianity really, really, I think, needs to kind of admit his wrongdoing. And I think that's a huge problem. And sure, that's not Paul's fault all the time. But the fact that they admit Paul was in existence, and yet they can't claim, like, we're going to ignore these things, is just as problematic. What I want to get into also is the fact that Paul was probably asexual, probably gay, and yet he still hated his own community. And I just have no space in my heart for that. There are some beautiful texts that Paul wrote and that he can use for liberation, and some that are inspiring. Like, he has a great definition of love, and I feel that people will lean on the beautiful text and the beautiful prose from a very well-educated scholar as a good reason why we should keep him around. But very much can be said about the different works that were taken out and not canonized in the Bible, specifically because it contradicted Paul, and because people use, what's his name? Okay, Augustine, and the other one with the T that I can't think of, it's eluding me. The early church fathers really thought, like, oh yeah, this makes sense. Oh yeah, this is with doctrine. Oh yeah, this, but they had to throw out those books because it did not match one thing Paul said. I think that's problematic. There's a lot of beautiful different works out there in the Apocrypha that Paul contradicted. So, in summary, Paul hates sex, women, men. He may or may not hate those things because he's just been used and abused. His words literally inspired thousands of years of pain, suffering, and death. And I don't think that we should keep what's good and then allow the bad to remain, because Paul was a serial killer who killed thousands of Christians and bragged about it before he was even a Christian himself. And if we're going to cancel somebody for saying the N-word, I think we should probably cancel a serial killer who's destroyed lives. Cancel Paul.
And scene. Well done, beloved.
Woo, I tried.
Wait, it's only me. All right, Oz. Thoughts? Correa. Oz. Hit me up.
You guys go first, by all means.
Yeah, I think they both started out really strong. I really like the direction that both of them are taking it. And I've been watching the chat to see, and I was kind of worried that everybody was going to be on the cancel Paul train and that nobody was going to be
No,
in
we have
Andrew's
people that
corner,
love
but
Paul
we
in
have
the
like
chat. Yeah.
like paid attention. And it's like we've got a good amount of cancel Paul, but I'm seeing some Team Daddy Pauls in here. So
To be fair, I don't want to give my 2 cents because I'm moderating, but I certainly am not taking one side to the other in like a very sort of distinctive way. I think both people have really good points, and I am interested to see how the rest of this goes. Oz.
Well, I'm not moderating, so I do not have to abide.
Give us your opinion. Get in here.
The Paul the Paul apologies to me are very weak. And at the end of the day, Paul is the he's the world's first MLM CEO, and he is the originator of really driving home the word faith. Which, if you're familiar with me or Tang, we have a sweet, cute little hashtag. Faith is bullshit, and Paul is
So
the root
cute.
of that. Paul is the root of that. So you're going to have to do a lot of convincing. You're going to have to do a lot of convincing to get me to not think that it's cancel Paul.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, I
right.
get what you, so at the Atheist Convention, Seth Andrews said something that I think was really powerful. And it was that if there's something wrong with the fundamentalists in your religion, it means there's something wrong with the fundamentals. And so it's like a lot of what has driven the fundamentalists in the religion are the epistles from Paul or people claiming to be Paul.
Yeah.
But I also get where Andrew is coming from and saying like some of that is just due to other people twisting what Paul has said. And so if we're going to critique him, to make sure you're doing it through you're doing it well, because there's better ways to criticize Paul.
Yeah. I also think that like I know that we view Paul through a very modern lens, and I don't want to say that we shouldn't, right? Like slavery is objectively wrong. Like you're not going to ever hear an argument from me on that front. But in certain instances, like with women teaching in church and doing whatever, as weird as it sounds, he did have some progressive views for his time. Now, does that mean we would view those as progressive today? No, absolutely not.
No,
but
Abraham Lincoln was racist. He may have
there's
Sorry,
yeah, no, it's fine. It's like I wouldn't say we should justify that. Understand this sort of context in which he was speaking, right? I don't know. I'm interested to see how this goes.
I was about to say that's a whole different debate, because I would and we don't have time, but I would disagree with that. I would completely disagree with that. But we can talk about that later.
Yeah. No, I'm not saying I'm 100% right. Not saying anything like that. I just think, there are some points we could talk about. I am not trust me, I am not a fan of Paul.
Oh, I know.
I just try very hard to recognize this sort of like historical, social, political, economic sort of situation in which people were talking. It doesn't make it right, but it does provide some kind of like nuance to it. That all being said, this is not my debate. I'm the moderator, bitch. Sorry, I've said too much. You know what I mean?
We next have the 5 minutes of the rebuttals.
Yes, this is what I'm going to do. I will run the timer. I'm going to get another drink. I think Andrew is up first for the rebuttal. Just leave me on screen so that I can do the timer.
Sure.
Andrew, let go. All right. How you
5
feeling?
minutes.
How you doing?
I'm great.
Yeah,
doing well.
5 minute rebuttal.
Cool.
Okay, ready? 3, 2, 1, go.
All right, JeGaysus, thank you for being here and beautiful. You didn't have to be one of those, but I appreciated that you were here. That wasn't a good joke. I'll move on quickly. An example of evangelicals, Paul being the first evangelical. I noticed you didn't define your terms, so debate faux pas. Now, I think it is interesting to suggest that he would fall into an evangelical lens. I would love to hear more about what you think would define an evangelical in all seriousness. I think it'd be very difficult to take this this Israelite, this Jewish man from the first century and place him as an evangelical. I would be interested to hear how you thread that needle. So I look forward to that. I don't have a rebuttal at the time. I would love to hear your definitions. Without Paul, we wouldn't have the genocides we have. I think we're giving the nations of the world a little too much credit. It's not like Paul was an inventor of genocide. I do think that Paul was used for genocide, but I also think that Paul was used because he was available to be used. It's not like the other ideologies of other people groups have not been used throughout history to suggest terrible things. I mean, we wouldn't have one of the earliest examples of racial profiling for the sake of slavery if it weren't for Aristotle, of all places. So I don't think we would throw Aristotle under the bus as being this like holistic starter of slavery, but we do find some of what the earliest examples from him when it comes to color-based profiling of the Western Mediterranean slave trade. The sex as celibacy. He was a celibate, and that's a problem. I wouldn't suggest it's problematic that he suggests this. I would like to suggest that that is an alternate lens and a pushback against what we see as the practice of the Abrahamic covenant. We see that the people of God are chosen through the bloodline of the Jewish people, usually through matrilineal, sometimes patrilineal, but usually matrilineal descendants. For some reason, the word slipped my mind. Paul, as suggesting that sex is no longer even necessary, is actually a radical pushback against the idea that being chosen for God and of God and by God is blood related. He suggests that it's for all people, which is actually a rather progressive move and a pushback against the theology of his origin. Paul's insufferable. Agreed. No pushback. Moving on. He plays all sides. I agree. He does play all sides, but I think that's actually one of the benefits of Paul as opposed to a detriment. When we see Paul playing all sides, like in the book of Romans, we see one of the most advanced examples of early Christian preaching rhetoric, where he looks towards one audience, being the Jewish audience, or historically Jewish audience, Torah observant audience, and speaks to them. And then he'll use like almost a Shakespearean method, a theatrical method. The Roman world was 4 to 6% literate at the time. So most of these letters would actually have been performed from stage, like theater. And so some of his rhetoric, you'd see almost like him speaking to the air, like a soliloquy, like we find in Shakespearean rhetoric as an example. I'm sure there's other examples we could use, but that's the first one that comes to mind. And then he would turn to the Gentile audience. I would suggest that playing all sides is actually one of the proofs of Paul's incredible education, which is why he should be kept, because we see some advanced preaching rhetoric from him. He never met Jesus. Yeah, he didn't. That's a whole thing. I have no pushback there. He contradicts the Old Testament and Jesus. I think that's good. To see pushbacks is not an uncommon thing. It does not in any way diminish Paul, in my opinion. It is our idea that some things are not worth criticizing, which is ironic considering we're in a debate. We will learn through the criticizing of other ideas and the pushing back of other ideas. What we now call the codified Old Testament would not exist if it weren't for them pushing back and contradicting each other intentionally. It was when evangelicals and inerrantists decided that the pushback is a problem that we reached to that point. Christianity must admit its wrongdoing. I completely agree. Paul's asexual. Prove it. He should not be canonized. Agreed. And serial killer, we only have one example of him legitimately killing someone in the Bible, and that's by his own claims and not by anyone else's. So I think suggesting that he killed thousands is a bit of a stretch.
You have 30 seconds.
And I think that you're really pretty and you should be nice to me in the rebuttal.
Nice. Oh, wait. That's you, JeGaysus, not me.
I think you're pretty too. So
thank you so much. I have no sway in this argument. All right.
That's a shame.
Okie dokie. Well done. We will reset. Thank you so much for coming to my TED Talk. JeGaysus, are you ready for your rebuttal, beloved?
Yes, I have notes, and I thought we were doing 10-minute rebuttals, so
Oh, sorry.
No, it's fine.
Speak very
It's
quickly.
okay. It'll just be a shorter show.
You think
Again,
you're pretty.
bear with me. I don't debate, but I do have the infamous JeGaysus post-its.
The post-its.
So
All right.
y'all
Oh, yeah. That is merch.
That is so cute. Whoever did that, that's so
Oh my
cute.
God,
Was that a
step
Crayon
down.
thing? Thank you.
I don't know. It's not me.
Okay.
Okay.
I guess
3,
I'm ready whenever. We'll just it's chicken scratch, so this is gonna be really interesting.
2, 1. You better work, bitch.
Okay, so I don't even know where to start with this. Andrew, I love you, but like Paul, not the man. So in your opening, and this is going to be a lot from your opening, you say that he's worthy of criticism and we should be judging him correctly. So I think right there is part of enough said. Like, you admit that he was problematic, which is already a step ahead of the evangelicals and saying that, like, yes, he had issues. But in a religion specifically that doesn't always admit that not everything in there is from God itself, maybe they should have taken out those problematic parts. Maybe they should have edited them out if they wanted this to be as pure and as open as they can be, or there needs to be discourse written about why they're problematic. And we don't see that because Paul says that, scripture is breathed, and therefore evangelicals took that to mean it's from God directly. When you wanted a definition of what I consider an evangelical and why I would consider Paul to be one of the first evangelicals, that's mainly just because he was out there spreading the gospel. I don't mean it as in he was, Pat Robinson or anything standing out doing that whole thing. But I do mean that he was out there spreading it. He was evangelizing. So you do acknowledge that he was one of the reasons why the church came together. And he's a big reason for the structure of the church. And that was exactly my argument that came very right after yours, is that, yes, the entire church is structured after Paul. Early Christians were very focused on Paul. The social dynamics you mentioned were because of Paul. So yeah, it's cool that we get to know their thought process and we get to see what early Christianity looked like. But again, that just means he had such a heavy hand of influencing this religion in which he's never met a Jesus. He's speaking for somebody he's never even met, and yet the entire church formation is based on that. Deleting Paul altogether would erase liberation theories. Okay, so yeah, maybe. But I would argue against that. Deleting Paul might, I guess, have very specific tied down reasons. If somebody said, I came to liberation through this word or this text or this scripture. But at the same time, I would argue that it's done more harm, and removing Paul and only keeping Jesus's words would have still had people reach liberation. If it was Jesus standing alone, his words are very powerful. Paul just made it so much more messy. Liberation could have happened just with Jesus. Killing thousands, and maybe it wasn't thousands, but like you did admit, he's the one who admitted to that, which who does that? Who goes around bragging that they killed anyone, even if they didn't? I don't like that. Celibacy isn't problematic. I agree. Celibacy isn't problematic, but him thinking everyone needs to be celibate, him pushing his idea of sexuality onto everyone is problematic. And when you said asexual, prove that. I don't actually think he was asexual. Personally, I think Jesus was asexual. I think Paul was a homosexual, which is why I say he's gay hater. Yeah, playing all sides. You said that's a genius move. I feel like that would be like calling Putin a war genius. Like, no, let's not do that. Playing all sides, I think, is kind of a sign of corruption, and the fact that he will change his story to get a better audience with whoever he's in front of is not a sign of goodness. And not against criticizing, but I do speak. Oh, yeah, I'm not against criticizing either. But what?
90 seconds.
90 seconds. Okay.
Yeah.
I just also wanted to point out something that might be confusing for a lot of people is I'm also not against criticizing, but a lot of when I speak of in terms is coming from evangelical perspective and a perspective of inerrancy. So while I do get criticism is great in that we can now have these dialogues, because Paul was pushing it back against maybe the Hebrew church, and then he was pushing it back against some early Christian leaders, which is great. It's great to have discourse, but I'm coming from an evangelical standpoint where there is only inerrancy. So sometimes that gets a little muddled because obviously none of us believe that, but my arguments are skewed from that perspective as if we all did. So I just wanted to clear that up for the rest of tonight as well. I don't know if I had any other And you said people like Augustine make him look bad, which like, yeah, because Augustine's the worst. So take that with what you will. And Aristotle should be canceled too. Yeah, I'm not saying that we should hold these people responsible. If you say Aristotle is one of the reasons why we have slavery, let's talk about why Aristotle should be out. Yeah, and with that, I guess I succeed the rest of my time. And you're more beautiful than me, so that's why you're married and I'm not.
Okay, well, I'm the most beautiful thing.
My heart!
To my TED Talk. All right. So, with that all being said, oh, that was my face very large. Oz, Correa, give me your thoughts. I'm simply drinking, to be honest. It seems to be the only thing I do on camera. Please continue.
Cheers.
I wish we had your little like soundboard for the like drinks thing. I need Oz to rap the intro for my show. I need it.
Oh, we can make that. I love doing that shit. Anyway, go
ahead. Talk to me after because I'm dead ass serious. Okay. But give me your all's thoughts.
Go ahead, Craig.
Well, I was asking, can I not go first? But
sorry.
Oh, I didn't hear that. So if you don't want to go first, I'll
yeah.
I simply have no thoughts.
There's two things that stuck out. If anything else comes up, I'll mention it. But one, the Paul, essentially, but Paul speaking to all people, all angles, all like in being all directional. That sounds like a politician.
Yeah,
that sounds like somebody just pushing an agenda, and isn't really worried about the people or the humans involved as much as he is worried about his own message, his own rhetoric, and trying to convince people of that. And as far as the sexuality thing, I think JeGaysus may be the first person that I've heard say this, that I agree 100%. I believe when Paul said he had a thorn in his side, I believe that was the thorn.
It was a dick.
And he couldn't talk about it, right? Because it was anti everything he stood for, and that's why he wouldn't mention it publicly. He wouldn't even come out and say what the thorn in his side was. So some people say it was masturbation. No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't.
Dog, are you familiar with the Roman Empire? Like, I'm sorry, but dudes were out there fucking the shit out of other dudes and like writing graffiti about it with like no cares in the world. There's like entire poetry about this because it wasn't viewed in the same way that it is today. But for Paul, it still would have been unacceptable.
Yeah, and I will close with saying again, he is the one that introduced the word faith into this religion and this belief system, which has just fucked up a lot of people, millions and millions and millions of people.
Oof.
I'm done.
Oh, all right. Sorry. I feel like I stole your speech because I was like, look at all this fucked up Roman graffiti.
Someone put a comment. I'm looking for it now so I could bring it up because I think it's an interesting point. Where can I find it? It was comparing Paul to a gun.
It was Aaron somewhere.
Yeah. So basically, so Paul is like guns. The more available they are, the more people die. Which of course is, obviously making the like anti-Paul stance very clear. But I also understand because like, so I went to a very progressive church. I didn't go to like a fundamentalist church where like women weren't allowed to like speak. Like we had women who had leadership positions on a regular basis. And like, even with like Ephesians, the Ephesians 5 that is used to like oppress so many women, what was taught in my church is that if the man is supposed to die for her, if he's supposed to be Christ, then he should be willing to submit first. He should be willing, like if it comes down to it, that if he should actually be the one to relieve his wife's stress and tension and, like try to make things like, because if you're going to love her, you have to love her. in the best way that you can, and you have to die to self. And so
I'm literally just saying that all men should die for me immediately.
And that is most certainly not a like that
That's
is
not biblical.
normal. That's
No.
not like that is not the message that is typically taught in church about that passage. So it really can be like how you use that message, but the
That's the
fact
entire
that
Bible.
so much of what Paul taught has harmed so many people is also incredibly problematic, and so it would be interesting even to just do like some ground research to see like among Christians and non-Christians if Paul's has been more helpful to them or not
Well,
helpful.
why
I
would
would also
anyone
like to
that's
know
not a Christian care about Paul?
exactly. It's like I
Sorry.
think that most skeptics or people who have like completely left the faith, like can kind of
do
see
think
what he says and go,
so okay, we can take this however we want, but I do think it's interesting to think about the fact that Paul had likely no conception whatsoever that the shit he was writing was going to be read
No way.
thousands of years later, trying to apply it to like
absolutely
a
not.
2022 audience. Like, he was writing a letter to like his friend. Now, is that to say I agree with him or what he said was right? Absolutely not. But I think that if we assume that Paul was writing in such a way that he thought this was going to be the be all and end all of the church for the next 50,000 years, like, that's not accurate. He thought Jesus was coming back tomorrow.
Yeah, well, and that's what in the chat, JeGaysus was talking about Paul's eschatology, and
Yes.
that's a whole nother conversation. But it is to the point where anybody that's a quote unquote cradle atheist, they don't give a fuck about Apostle Paul. They don't give a fuck. They don't even know who the motherfucker is, right? But it's people that are currently believers, but especially if you're a former evangelical charismatic, you know who the fuck Paul is, and you know what the fuck
Amen, brother.
Paul had on this shit, and he he can be attributed as being the first one to introduce this eternal punishment and torment and damnation, and that, so you take that and couple it with faith, fuck off, bro.
Yeah.
Fuck
But
off.
you know what's also funny is that Paul was like the first embarrassment to the faith, where like he went out and tried to preach the word and like ended up in his mother's basement because he just like failed so fucking hard.
Also,
Sorry.
he was like Darth. He ended up in his mom's basement because he was an embarrassment.
Darth Dawkins.
Yeah.
What up, bitch? But he really did. He like came back and was like hanging out at his mom's place because everybody rejected him, which, like, I won't say it's endearing, but I do love that he was kind of checked before his ministry. Yeah. But I will let perhaps Andrew speak to that if you would like. All right. Yes. So I think everyone is back. So we're going to open the floor for a 20-minute dialogue. I don't think that at this point I get to dictate who starts. But if anyone has an opening point, I will start the timer. Give me a moment. In 3, 2, 1. Get it, besties.
Actually, question. Wait, so why are we timing this one if we're doing open dialogue?
It's 20-minute open dialogue between the two of you, and then there's questions.
Hi, JeGaysus.
Yeah. And then there's questions after.
Got you. Okay. Who wants to start? Hi.
I'm just here for the homoerotic tension.
I'd love to talk about Paul's rhetoric and like playing both sides. I think that'd be so neat. Okay, so
Love it.
So I do agree with Oz's point that it's like a politician because, yeah, a lot of the rhetoric that Paul uses is very much the same rhetorical pattern that we find all the way back to the sophists, and what we find mirrors of today as well. So if it sounds familiar, it most certainly is. So you're right. I know that today we associate that word almost exclusively with like dishonesty and nefarious intent, and I totally get that. Justified, warranted. Whenever we see Paul playing to both sides, it is in a letter where there is already an established mixed audience, where there is two communities that by the end of the letter, we see being brought together in some kind of way through speaking to how he understands both of them thinking. Like the Roman letter is without a doubt one of the most advanced rhetorical letters in the New Testament.
Mhm.
And we see him speaking to the non-Torah observant Christians and the Torah observant Christians and addressing both of them. And by the end, making a cohesive point to bring them together. I think it's much to suggest that that is nefarious or intellectually dishonest or even emotionally dishonest, and more a way to speak to the different perspectives of the people that he is addressing.
Okay, so
Question.
go ahead.
Sorry, moderator injecting my bitch ass self. And this is an honest question. What do you think Paul's objectives were?
That was going to be part of mine, actually, if I can just roll off of it.
Please do. Yeah, sorry.
So my first question would be, why was that necessary? Why is Paul needing to change up the books and change up the rules of how he's going to play this to make sure that everyone was on this new same side? I would arguably say this is a new same side because there was not these rules or laws.
And whose theology is this?
Whose theology?
Yeah.
Prior to the Jerusalem Council, right?
Right.
One sec. Okay, so
I'm gonna be quiet.
Who gave him this power and who gave him this responsibility to bring both sides together, if you will? Like, yes, it's a beautiful thing. However, it is creating an entire new religion on the back of we should all be allowed to do this thing. And the only person who, in my opinion, was the one to decide that Paul should do that was Paul. Because I think we have a narcissistic ego to deal with here. And for him to have so much power and so much responsibility is very un-Spider-Man-like.
So the honest answer is who gave Paul that authority, and that would be the Church of Antioch. One of the interesting things that we find is that we have this council. On the council is Barnabas, one of the greatest church benefactors that we have mentioned in the book of Acts. Peter, who is, in many cases considered the first pope by Catholics and the Orthodox Church, as well as, venerated as a apostle by many. So he is placed as the authority figure of the church by many respects, theologically speaking. And so a council of these 5 individuals together vote and suggest that Paul and Barnabas should go on mission together.
Not to interrupt you, but do we not see a problem?
Not to interrupt me, but you interrupted me. That's what that was. It was an interruption.
Interrupt you. But do we not see a problem with a group of 5 men getting together and having
There's always a
vote?
problem with a group of 5 men.
There's always a problem with a group, unless it's a bathhouse. Do we see a problem with a group of 5 men getting together and voting on what the direction of the rest of the world should be? Is that not problematic?
I would consider a problem with 5 men getting together to vote on what the rest of the world should be. However, they were not voting on what 5 men. These 5 men were not voting on what the rest of the world should be. These 5 men were representing a smaller version of a council, a larger council that were appointed by that larger council to be this executive committee for the purpose of church plants.
And we never see that go wrong with senators like Manchin and Sinema.
They were deciding the who would be sent out to plant these churches. And instead of going in the direction that James's theology was suggesting, this council, which James was not even elected to be a part of, which I think is really interesting, is places Paul and Barnabas with Mark in tow to.
Follow-up question. You did mention Peter was considered the first pope, and I also have some problems with Peter, but just because I think it's kind of funnier. But I think this is
big pope
an interesting
energy.
Topic that I didn't touch on. You didn't either. Why is it that so much of modern Christianity and the way that the Bible is formatted, why is it so heavily emphasized on Paul when Peter was the one who's out and directed by Jesus directly to build the church?
Because Peter ain't right shit.
He did.
Are you expecting me to educate?
Crucified allegedly upside down.
Sorry, like the Apocalypse of Peter. We have a couple of works even that survived throughout the years in the Apocrypha that are supposedly penned by Peter. But why was there not more emphasis on Peter's direction, and why did they just kowtow to Paul?
First of all, did you hear the shady thing I just said? I totally said a shady debate thing. I said,
Oh, sorry.
do you expect me to educate you in this debate, or do you expect to make points for yourself?
Okay. Well, yes, I expect you to educate me in all things, actually, because you have the education and I don't. Look at all those books behind him and look at my empty bookshelf. I just bought it 2 days ago, but that is really just ironic of like representation.
This is fun. So the immediate answer off the top of my head is we find Peter emulating Jesus. What Jesus did is he did not go out, but rather he gathered and sent out. And
like
so
Jesus
we find
should.
Peter emulating the same mission strategy that we find from Jesus.
Ding, ding, ding.
Now,
and
that's
Paul wanted to go out and evangelize and push it in people's face.
Bro,
Yep.
Peter's bitch ass was extra as fuck.
now
When we get crucified upside down according to the legend.
Well, that's the
Yeah,
way you do it.
it sounds exhausting.
Crucified.
It does.
like,
Like,
we
the
just
nail
like other
into the
versions of
cross
crucifixion
upright.
that
Like,
were
it's a
pleasant.
headache, to be honest.
I thought no one really
Okay,
got.
I'm gonna shut the fuck
crucified
up. Sorry,
but- okay.
I've injected myself into this debate. It's too
No,
much.
what has happened is we've officially entered into the edited out space of our podcasts.
I
That's
just
what's
love y'all
officially
so
happening.
much.
Fair.
Oh, so
This is why you guys need me.
that's what.
I'm sorry, I'm the worst.
No. You're
No, but I
best.
did love what you just said, and Christy brought it back up in the chat. So what you're saying is Peter wanted to be like Jesus and do the Jesus things because he knew Jesus, and Jesus
But
was like,
not
"Hey, let's do
quite.
this." And Paul was like, "No, let's bring the Gentiles into it. Let me go over here and start spreading churches up in Corinthians." Paul wanted to do all the let me get fame, let me get power, and let me get people's ear, while Peter was like, religion should
Let me
live in
get
your heart,
crucified upside down. Sounds like a good time.
which is my argument against
no,
Paul.
that's not what Paul did. So we don't really find any textual evidence to suggest that Paul got fame or wealth from his journeys.
I still
that's
hear
not
about
really
him. That's pretty
exists.
famous.
I didn't hear what you said.
Like,
What?
I said I still
wealth?
hear about him. That's pretty famous.
I mean, that doesn't mean that that's good. I mean, you just hear about him. What we find is that this council at Antioch voted on who should go, and there was a casting of lots, and a decision was made. It was like a mystical procedure. It was actually pretty interesting. And when this happened, the ones who were decided to go was Paul and Barnabas, and they were these church planters.
Paul was the original incel. Okay,
And Barnabas was the original Jesus.
I don't even know where we are anymore.
Andrew, am I wrong
had, like,
in that
whole ass
Paul lived
sentences.
in his mom's basement
I
after
don't-
his failed
That was
missionary trip?
so. Yeah, so like Paul failed at least twice in ministry before Barnabas went to go find him in Antioch. By
He was
all
like,
respects, most likely
Dog,
at his
get
mom's
the
house.
fuck out of
or
your
probably in
mom's
his
basement and let's like do some bullshit together.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
so Barnabas and I realize that there's like this suggestion that like Peter never even met Paul. He only saw him for like a couple days. That's not true. In fact, there's this really fun beef between Peter and Paul.
I was gonna
And
say
by
that
all
too. Did they
respects, he
fight?
got a significant amount of training at Antioch under this collection of theological voices, one of them being Peter. Now, what is interesting, and this doesn't help the debate, I don't even think we're doing that anymore.
No, let's get back to the debate. I still have more.
He veered off. So
is like, so we never find Peter and Paul agreeing, like ever. It's never a thing. Like Peter never goes, and because of this, I'm sorry, Paul. Now there is this whole like vision, like the meat tornado thing, which sounds like a bad porn, and there's this that is most likely like a mystical writing of like Peter's submission to Paul being correct. There's an argument to be made there. But in the last thing we find written in the New Testament, First and Second Peter, right, is like we find mention that what Peter has to say about Paul is that he's a poor writer, and I think that's hilarious. That's the last thing
the
we
grammar
hear.
sucks, bitch.
Well, I
think it's
mean,
hilarious.
it's a good diss.
Catch me
but-
outside.
But again, we just circled back to the whole thing that Paul and Peter were on opposite sides. And it's so strange that the entire church would be hung up on following this one person who had never met Jesus. If you find yourself on the opposite side of an actual disciple who knew Jesus, it means you're probably wrong about what
Paul
Jesus
was a Roman
teaching.
plant. That's my conspiracy theory.
I think
that's
so.
absolute bullshit. Like
it is bullshit. It's also my conspiracy.
So can I just like riff for a second?
Yes,
like
I've gone off the rails entirely.
So Paul has enough problematic shit that we don't have to make stuff up. We don't have to make up like the one thing that I absolutely hate, and I do hate this, like I have an emotional response to it, is like if we're gonna be committed to truth, let's not stop when we hear a conspiracy theory that backs up our points. Like just like, ooh, if I just believe this instead, like Paul as a Roman plant is 3 steps away from birds are spies made by the government for me. Like,
birds
like
don't exist.
You know what?
I don't know.
Relax.
I think if we really get into
conspiracy.
it, I do think Constantine invented Christianity, and maybe Paul wasn't even real.
I don't agree with that at all. But
yeah, of course, Andrew, I love you so much. I just have
consider like
ridiculous.
So I actually agree with Andrew on this point, because even when it comes to like Paul's sexuality, like I think he was more likely gay than not gay. But since we don't have it confirmed, I don't feel comfortable just like stating it as a fact because we don't have.
I would say largely Paul was confused about his sexuality, and whatever it was, he just decided it was not.
Well, can I like address some of the things like?
Yes.
So
Get it, my bearded friend.
So Paul's sexual ethic is one of the most interesting things about him, and I'm not saying good, I'm not saying bad, I'm saying interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
To suggest that not getting married is a possibility, that's like in a world of dowries.
In that time and place, not getting married was like radical.
He didn't say like the possibility is not getting married though. He said you shouldn't. Like that's my issue again. If he comes out with hard like don't do this because I don't want to.
This is Greek rhetoric. You need to read it like he's a messy bitch. It's Greek rhetoric. You have to read it like he's a messy bitch. You read it with sass, okay? So it's like
this has gone off the rails.
If I had my way about it. If I had my way about it, we would all be celibate. But if you can't control your sexual desires, then you might as well get married. Like, that is a fantastic rhetoric right there.
Jesus, your eyeballs.
Like the thought. And I think this is super fucking cool. This is super fucking cool. Well, I'm going to say it's cool until someone lets me say it.
We got Kent in the chat.
Oh my gosh, what in the world is happening? The problem is that none of these atheists can ground.
Wait. I feel like I know this man.
Digital.
Well,
Kent Hovind, is that you?
That's the gorilla, right?
Digital
Harambe.
What is this binary Kwanzaa thing going on here?
So he's pretending to be
Harambe is one of the days of Kwanzaa.
That's one of his sticks.
Explain it.
I want to address the elephant in the room, which is that half of the epistles were written by Paul.
Yes. Yeah. And I've gently breezed over that.
Like 2 Timothy, where it says that women can't speak in church, and where it says that women are only
not just that, they can only redeem themselves through childbirth.
Couldn't be me,
like,
to be honest.
Didn't actually write that.
But here's the thing, it doesn't always come out of the disputed epistles. There are a few just misogynist epistles in the real ones still. Verses. He's not like totally out there, even though he had Phoebe, and maybe there was Thecla, and there was these other people that he was championing. It doesn't mean that was always true. Was my mic that low the whole time? I'm sorry, you guys.
No, you were good.
Yeah, he was still misogynist because it was 2,000 years ago, and like misogyny is going to be a thing. And that's also, not saying it should be excused.
That women pre-1970 United States had bank accounts. Like, it's not like misogyny stopped at Paul. Like,
no, of course. I'm not saying that he's the reason. I'm not saying he invented it. I'm just saying a lot of people in Paul apologetics forget that, just because you can throw out apologetics. Just because you can throw out 6 of these books that have crap in them doesn't take away from the fact that, like, Romans was his, and Romans is used against the gay community to this day. There's still, you can't just throw out the non-Paul verses. There's still problematic Paul things, is what I was getting at.
So I think if we would have kept in like a legitimate debate space, the strongest space that you would have had here is Paul as a chauvinist. That would have been the strongest one, in my opinion, because like you don't really find a redeeming rhetoric for women from Paul aside from just a pushback against patriarchy. That's all you really get. It's now granted, I do think that's meaningful, like in his time and his space, not thinking that he was going to be writing for a long period of time or preserved for a long period of time necessarily. He pushes back against the patriarchal structures. I think that's interesting and worth noting, but not enough for us to like do what evangelicals do, where they like preserve the writing in a cryogenic state and go, from where we sit, we need to go back to that. That's fucked up. Like that's like there is nothing. And here's what I think is really interesting about Paul as well. There is nothing about Paul's writings that would suggest he wanted us to be people that backtrack to an older way of being. He was always looking at a new way. And I
don't find that redeeming about him at all.
I'm not suggesting it's redeeming. I said interesting. I said interesting.
Okay.
Did you hear all of, like the condemning stuff I said? I meant those things too.
Yes. No, and I understand that you mean them. I just think
is
that you're
Oz?
more on the side of canceling Paul than you say you are. I feel like you're on a Paul was the worst, but we should learn from him train. And I think that's,
to be honest,
a dangerous place to be.
I'm moderating. I can't give my opinion.
Because people hang every
But I have a
word
question.
on the
No.
Bible.
Correa,
Too dangerous.
the courageous and the heathen queen.
Yes.
We're actually in like
Hold
a
on.
good debate space. So like,
Sorry. Where is Oz? Is he coming back?
no,
He is.
he is. I'm just saying whatever I think at this point. Oh no,
Wait.
I would say
Oz is summoning Josh. How dare you?
JeGaysus.
Yes.
So like,
Josh is asleep.
I think one of the things that is like doesn't make me great for these debates is I don't exactly have like a hard line, except like I think that it's an incredibly advanced rhetoric, and I think that's a good thing. That's about it for me.
You like the writing style, okay?
I think it's a
I would
fascinating
like
historical
to
writing
ask
style.
Andrew a question that I think would help. with
Yeah,
the
what's
argument.
up?
So your whole thing, because the whole reason I called your team Daddy Paul is because when we initially talked about this, you said that you thought, or that you think that Paul is the father of inclusion.
I do.
So can you talk, because I feel like what JeGaysus's point, and if I'm strawmanning,
I say playing all sides. Andrew says that's including everyone.
Yeah,
It's
so that
both
like
ways.
yours is that his work is like divisive, that it oppresses people and is, excluding people and trying to control them. While it sounds like, Andrew, your point is, so can you talk a little bit more about why you think that is and what your argument is for that?
This isn't one that I can make well if I get interrupted at all, because this is like very okay. So this is something that white people are not going to get I'm just going to lead with that. Like,
What about me?
No.
Okay.
So, well, maybe I've had a little bit of wine. Here's what I mean. When we find Paul speaking, he is speaking as a Jewish man in a Roman world to a primarily Jewish church. Now, this is a weird thing for us to wrap our heads around, because the vast majority of us have never been in a majority Jewish space.
Yeah,
Ever.
that's true.
For a lot of terrible fucking reasons.
Yeah,
So-
and most
so-
of us that have identified as Christian or even just have a Christian understanding would be shitting on Jews left and right unknowingly.
Right. Yes. So like Paul exists in a really strange space that in many ways most of us have never experienced. And I think that's really important for us to acknowledge. Like, he is in a Roman world where for some reason the Jews have not been fully wiped out yet. And these Jewish people exist as his people that he is addressing in his letters. In a real way, we are watching an ethnic man speak to his ethnic group, and we as non-ethnic people are reading it. And like,
We
that's
should not be allowed to judge it fully.
that's fucking weird. Like, it's just weird shit, because like when Paul is criticizing Judaism, he is criticizing it from the inside and not with a loudspeaker on it. He's not. Like, it is a like some of these letters that have the most evocative language from Paul. He is not like, we don't see him suggesting they be circulated.
I thought you were going to say circumcised.
Both.
Don't circumcise.
Because he was the one who came out and been like, it's cool if you're not circumcised, you guys, you can still get into heaven, which is like...
Same prefix.
No. He went
the
Def Jam
suffix is
comic
really
on
important.
it. He said, if you think you need to circumcise yourself, why don't you just castrate yourselves to get the whole thing off? Wouldn't that make you holy? It's in Galatians
your best
5. It's
life,
fucking
y'all.
fantastic.
I don't think that's him making fun again. I think that's him being really, really dramatically sex adverse.
Wait, but I thought Galatians is one of the suspected forgeries.
No,
Is it not?
that's an inclusive one. That's, so suspected forgeries are like
3,
Ephesians,
2.
Colossians,
Mhm.
and then gosh, brain kick in.
Are we on the non-Paul?
Corinthians,
Tim?
and the letters thereafter.
I no longer know what we're doing, so
like the reason I would say that Paul is working from an inclusive lens, he is taking this rhetoric of his people, that suggests that they are the chosen people of God, and he is extending that beyond his chosen people into other communities.
yes.
That that have been within his community, within his like microcosm, considered unclean.
Rev Raya.
I
in the chat,
hate that.
and
for
I'm
him.
saying
I
yes.
see that as
Yes.
missionary work. I see that as him extending himself into different communities, like where, yeah, it's beautiful that he was taking this Jewish ethnicity out of like oppressive spaces and reinserting them back into Roman culture. But the way in which you're doing that is by trampling on what then? Roman beliefs and saying, no, look at ours are better. Problematic. I don't like missionaries to do that anywhere. I know that can lead to like some bridges, but could also lead to worldwide genocide. So if I had my wish, and I meant cultural genocide, sorry. But
I understand. If I had my wish about it, if there was one argument that I would think could be put to rest, because it's popular, but I don't think it flies. I really don't. Is this idea that Christianity is responsible for the genocides? I'd put that to rest in a heartbeat. Here's why. Empire does not give a fuck what tools are available to kill people. It has never given a fuck. It's not going to give a fuck if Christianity dies tomorrow. It's going to pick up something else. It didn't need Christianity to do it in the first place. Christianity made itself useful, which is fucked up. That's a whole conversation.
Christianity is the conduit, but they could have found some other conduit.
Like, there were so many spaces prior to Christianity were people were just destroying
the Roman Empire
each other.
Was already going everywhere before they even heard the name.
Exactly. So like, we're friends. I'll say it to y'all. Like,
we're friends.
Oh, shut up. No, so like when I hear other people like making it as like the focal primary point, I know we're just kind of like talking, but like when other people say the primary point is that it was the tool of it, feels like a bad education in history to me.
Yes.
Like
Empire will always find a way.
Always. First and foremost, and if anybody's listening, learns anything from this, like this is my like fuck Paul if you believe me on this one. The economic structure of the nation has always been in charge of whatever nation is there, and it will use whatever the fuck it can to get its desires, and most of it is to use you as a commodity. Like, I believe that,
which is great, but I also would say again that we can't let that mean that we concede to the fact that it's okay. So by saying yes, Christianity isn't the only reason that this happens, and it would have happened if someone else did it, like that would be the same as me, I don't know, like, you know, shooting a gun at someone and be like, well, they were gonna die anyway.
We should excuse the fact
we can't
that
say it like that.
Christianity was the available tool.
Not at all.
However, I do think that we need to hold space for this kind of duality of like there was this Christianity that existed and that had been persecuted, and I have my feelings about whether or not they were like severely persecuted. There's lots of scholarship around that. But they felt they were persecuted. And so when they were adopted by the empire, I think it's a totally natural human response to then say, maybe we can make something of this. Now, do I think that they should have done that? Not necessarily. again, I'm not a part of this debate, but we're all fucking drunk, and so I'm just like saying my shit at this point. Sorry, there's no winners here, except for me apparently.
This is technically only my second glass of wine.
Oh well, that's nice for you because I've had many gin and tonics. So maybe I should just stop talking. To be honest.
Well, actually, I think we're probably wrapping up the 20-minute.
Yeah,
part,
sorry, I'm gonna shut the fuck up.
Do you guys want to move into Q&A? Do we have any last thoughts or closings? Oh no, closings came after Q&A.
I mean, I'm good for whatever is left.
Oz.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, you're
Honestly,
I
He's
fucked it all
technically
up.
the guest on the channel, so maybe we should like count on it.
Yeah. I just fucked it up.
Oh, we're good. No, great conversation, and this is where I always drill down when you start getting to semantics and you get this far into the weeds. I then have to pull back and say, if this Yahweh guy, if this Yahweh motherfucker actually knew what the fuck he was doing, this wouldn't even be a conversation right now. We wouldn't be talking about Paul and what Paul or Peter, what they did, what the fuck they didn't do, because Yahweh is supposed to be omni everything, right? And have all this shit orchestrated and lined up and perfectly written into history, right? But he didn't, because he doesn't know shit. Why? Because he's not real. You know, so that's the whole thing. Like, these are fun conversations, but I always the skeptical part of my brain always has to pull back, be like, you know what? These are all semantics, and it's all bullshit because it's all fantasy, because the supposed author of this shit isn't even there.
He said what he said.
It's a whole other conversation.
Wait, someone said, is the aftercare portion going to be streamed?
Is the aftercare portion? I've never.
We do
from
just kind of
now
leave
on,
people hanging.
let the record show that closing statements will now be called aftercare.
I mean,
oh, we can make those our
dog.
closing statements. That's great. I love that idea,
Next time,
actually.
yeah.
okay, so with what
Questions.
Oz said, there was a question from the audience that said, dead people can't give consent. Would Jesus, #Jesus is a myth, have wanted to be used like Paul used him?
Okay, can I start with that?
Yeah, do I look like
Sure.
Jesus to you?
I would fully say that I would not be here on TikTok without without Paul's great work. No, but I don't think he would have. I don't think Jesus was here to spread a message of, hey, I'm Jesus, look at me. Everyone should believe in me to get to heaven. I think the way that he was ministering to people was very much trying to set up a
He wanted heaven on
conversation.
earth.
He wanted heaven on earth, and he wanted people to be able to take care of them himself. He didn't have this vision that he was going to die and then his death was going to be salvation. These things got promoted and taken over by Paul, and I honestly don't believe that Jesus would have been very cool with how that was used. I think it was kind of an accident that he got crucified. It wasn't in his book. And I also don't think that Jesus was doing a lot of these miracles, but Paul kind of trumped him up with some of the other writers of the gospel to make him a little bit more fantastical and godlike than Jesus ever even made himself.
But also not even Paul, like the authors of the gospels.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
And again, this is
Exactly.
not me defending a certain side, but like the men, God, sorry, this is me being drunk, but like the men that wrote the gospels, one, never met Jesus, two, wrote them like decades after Jesus died, and three, had a very specific agenda for writing the gospels. And also, the way that they wrote, I don't even know what you want to call it, biographies, if you want to say that, back then, was not in the way that we think of them today. It was very much in the way of like, this is how this person was sort of characteristically, so I'm going to write stories that exemplify those traits.
May I jump in there?
Yes, please.
Yes, I want to hear from you as well.
Sorry, yeah. Shut me up.
I mean, to just be frank, a lot of the arguments that we use to talk about the Bible are arguments that we would not have if it weren't for evangelical success. Because we would not, like, I'll use George Carlin as an example. half of his comedy. I love George Carlin. I have all of his books on my shelf right here, so don't come after me.
But did you
George Carlin's half of his comedy existed because of the pervasive nature of an inerrantist worldview. Like, his criticisms came from a very specific branch of what he understood to be Catholicism. And that's just how it existed. So, like, half of the things that we say about these authors that have been dead for a very, very long time have come from people that are completely removed from their ethnic groups, completely removed from their national perspectives, completely removed from their ideas of like magic and mysticism, and completely removed from their understanding of what their life should even be about in the first place. And so we're having fights, most of us, half of the time, that don't actually have anything to do with what these people, many of these being minority groups that are oppressed in their communities, were writing about. And
which is why I think Scientology should be the world religion, because it's most recent.
Sure.
Well,
If there's one thing I love, it's a religion that started in capitalism. That's fantastic.
Eat shit, David Miscavige. You know what I'm saying? Where
But
is
it's like-
Shelley?
Where is Shelley?
when
Sorry,
we
go.
were-
It's weird that these texts, many of them written by either felt oppression or legitimately oppressed people groups, are now owned by the oppressors.
Mhm.
That is a reality of a lot of these texts, and I don't think we address that enough. That these people were writing.
We have
from-
an Empire episode that we go into that entire argument.
Right.
So if people want to watch that, they should.
So
it is-
I want to.
Oz has been trying to say something for a little bit.
Yeah, go ahead, Oz.
in my ADHD brain will let it go. So I'm sorry, but and I don't want to have to chase that squirrel down. Andrew, what you just said, I think I don't think I know that there are elements, or huge elements of that do have to be acknowledged, addressed, and so on and so forth. When we step back though and we look at it from the evangelical perspective, and what, especially what it looks like today, and Craig brought a great point up earlier that I've had discussions with other people about before, is the fundamentalism, right? And so I was an all-state baseball player, and all I ever got hammered into my head was the fundamentals, the fundamentals, the fundamentals, the fundamentals. And as long as you keep grasp of the fundamentals, you will succeed, right? As soon as you deviate from that is when you fuck up, right? So if we know what the Bible says, it says that God, Yahweh, the author of this text, this book, is the same yesterday, today, and forever.
It's a big lie.
So, but if you're going to embrace it by fundamentals, if you are a fundamentalist, that means the things that he preached or he prescribed or that he inspired in that book thousands of years ago, he is the same. His nature is the same. His love is the same. His grace is the same.
Right.
It's the same yesterday, today, and forever. So eliminates, for the fundamentalist point of view, I'm not talking about progressives or anybody like that. For the fundamentalist, that my goddamn internet. I'm sorry.
You're back.
I thought it was me. I was like,
My internet every once in a while just does it. But for the fundamentalist, that does away with that takes the historical, like cultural, societal conversation, and it throws it out the window. It throws it out the goddamn window, because why? Yahweh, the God that they serve, is the same yesterday, today, and forever.
Right.
And that's the problem we have when we're talking about fundamentalism.
I don't disagree. Like, I loved what you said earlier. If there's something wrong, I'm sorry, Correa, it might have been you that said it, that at Seth Andrews, was that the one that said it at the
Conference, that if there's something wrong with the fundamentalists in your religion, there's something wrong with the fundamentals of that religion.
I agree.
Zero disagreement. Like, and what's hard about Christianity is, like, if you study historical Christianity, you are not studying a religion. You're studying a milieu of religions that somehow call themselves Christianity. Like, so many different religions. And, like, in my opinion, and as someone who was raised in and I've heard some stories of evangelicals, and I'm like, oh shit, I didn't have it that bad. So I'd say I was evangelical adjacent. Like, I thought I had it bad until I started talking to people. And
Holla.
Relate.
So what I would say is the only way to continue existing in an evangelical Christianity or a fundamentalist Christianity is either a full commitment to intellectual dishonesty or an admittance into atheism. If that's all there is, you have to pick one or the other. It's either like none of this is fucking true at all, or I gotta lie to myself my whole life so I feel better on my deathbed.
Yeah.
I can't. I could not exist in that world. I had to go into other spaces. So like, I think, I hope we get to a point where this really complicated series of religions, and not just one religion, but really a series of religions, can be owned by people that are not exclusively tied to oppressors, because there's a fascinating mysticism here that I hope we can continue talking about. And I'm not suggesting that we should believe it. I'm suggesting that, like, I would even call it a bastardization of Yahweh, a bastardization of like this Adonai figure of the Bible from the fundamentalist perspective is not worth our consideration. But these other considerations are fascinating. I'm not suggesting we should believe in them. I'm saying fascinating.
If I could just ask Andrew one. Sorry, just one.
No, go ahead, ask the question, and then
Well, you're
we've got
frozen,
some
so
questions
give it
from
a
the
second.
audience, so I want to make sure to get to them.
Yep, okay, this will be
Jess,
fast.
if you need to pee, it's okay. Go ahead.
It'll be
Awesome,
fast.
ready. Go for it.
Andrew,
this is for.
would you consider Christianity, like post Paul now, especially in 2022? Would we be better off calling it Paulinism than Christianity?
There was a time where I would say yes. Here's my reluctance. I think most people that say they like Paul actually just really like what their white male pastor had to say about Paul. I think there's some weird shit Paul does that would be considered extremely controversial to a lot of these men in three-piece suits. Like he advocate like now I want to say very clearly, Paul does not make a progressive enough case for us to follow him identically to how it suggests. He doesn't. We shouldn't do that. But like in his time, Paul is making suggestions of an advocation towards a better marriage for women and a more restrictive power of men in the text of in the Ephesian text specifically. And that's really fucking weird. And there's not a single evangelical pastor that preaches that on a Sunday morning. Because
no, I know what you mean. I'm former evangelical, so I'm laughing.
Yeah. So like when we like Paul, like it's really weird because to hear women submit to your husbands in a world where women are property, no one's going to sit there and clutch their fucking pearls. They're going to be like that. That's not going to be anybody's takeaway for the sermon. Like if you're property, submit to your husbands ain't exactly fucking news. But to hear that there is any kind of limitation on your husband's power over you at all, that would get some elbows on the pews. That's a different kind of sermon. Now, I'm not suggesting
it may not, but I mean, that's what I opened with. I don't think the evangelical church, as we've seen it modeled, would be able to exist without the words of Paul. Like if they were going strictly off of the words of Jesus or just the sayings of Jesus,
I do agree with
or
that.
even the narrative of Jesus,
I don't disagree.
Take your poison. There would not be an evangelical church possible. So I think in the way of looking at the modern church as being more following or more followers of Paul than of Jesus, I would widely agree with the point that some people are making. More following.
May I add to that?
Mm-hmm.
So I agree with you. And if it weren't for if it weren't for a reading that tried to make empirical data out of historical documents, like what we find from the Enlightenment, we wouldn't necessarily find these things done to Paul's literature.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was this weird thing that happened in the modern era where what we did is we took text and decided that we needed to quantify everything historical. And there were some really amazing things that happened from that. And I'm not going to pretend there weren't. But one of them was we decided to read everything from how we wrote history. And so I don't necessarily think, and let me know how many things you want me to say about how much the church is fucked up, and I will after this sentence. But I don't necessarily think that one is on the church, because I don't think the church was in charge of modernism. I think the natural progression of how we tried to interpret how we understood reality was not owned exclusively by the church. Well, at all by the church, frankly. And I don't know if we would be reading Paul the way we do today if it weren't for that move towards modernism.
I don't know.
Now, a lot of
it's interesting. I think it's more of a thought experiment than more of like something we could say objectively.
I mean, I'd be willing to say it more as a thought experiment. I mean, and this isn't my opinion. Like this is like, and it's not necessarily scholarly consensus. It's a philosophical conversation that's happening in a lot of theologians that like what we see done to historical literature in the modern era is really fucking weird, especially towards Eastern literature in a sense of Western supremacy. Like, because Christianity is first and foremost an Eastern religion. And like it started from an Eastern space, and then all these Western dudes with Western thinking said, I got that figured out. And we've all met that guy in like freshman philosophy class. He thinks he understands everything. And that's what we did in like the modern era is we went, I got this figured out. Don't worry. I've got this for you. And let me know how many things I need to say that the church did that's bad. I'll say them all. But I do think that that's something we need to hold in consideration when we look at history, which is not a case for Christianity, but it's a notion of what we need to think about with history.
And I was going to say, Craig, I apologize because I took us on that tangent. So.
It's okay.
It was a
I
fun
just want
one.
to start. I do like we've got some questions from the audience, so I definitely want to get to them. One is, so this wasn't really a question, but the comment made me think of a question from one of Christy's TikToks. And so here she says, he was thanking churches for their gifts and payments in his letters. Now, I'm not off the like top of my head biblically literate enough, but I think like because Christy made a point in a TikTok where there was like one letter that he wrote where he would say that he would never accept payment. And then in another letter, it's where he's thanking a different church for their gifts and their payments.
Yeah.
And so I think like, especially with a lot of these comments talking about him as like a con man, I think some people like see these contradictions in Paul, and I'm just like, I don't know if those were like, one was a forgery and one was like actually him, or like what but I would love to get some insights from you on it.
Time out. Before we do that, Neil, what's up? Ryan, what's up? We can get some insight on that. Ryan would also like breaking down which letters are Paul and which letters are pseudo-Pauline, which I feel like we could probably answer. And also like, P.S. we're dating Paul, Neil. That's the deal.
MLM. That's right. Oz did say that MLM.
Oh, my bad, Andrew.
Like, he was the first one doing that. But I feel like, again, with the whole comment thing, I don't even know if we can answer it without looking up which verses specifically. I think it would make sense if they were contradictory because of the pseudo-Pauline verses that he's about to talk about. But I also feel like it could be partially what I was saying earlier, where he plays different sides. Like, I don't blame him for getting gifts from churches, because like that's what ministry does. If you're going to be traveling, you have to have a way to travel. But
bottom, Paul.
But you can't be playing both sides by saying like, yeah, give up all your possessions like Jesus said, and then turning around and being like, thank you so much for your gifts.
But like Paul's entire thing was bringing folks into the fold. And I cannot speak to whether or not there was some kind of like ulterior motive for Paul bringing people into the fold. I don't know, right? Like, what does he gain by making people Christians? Maybe someone else can answer that. I don't know. But he's certainly like, I'll stop. What
yeah, I definitely want to hear from Andrew though, because this is a question for him.
Yeah, sorry.
No, it's okay.
You know what I mean?
So I
love you.
I love you too.
I'll do 2 minutes and then I'll stop. But just, I love y'all. Don't interrupt me. Okay, so
Hey, man, what happened?
I will do what I want, to be honest. Yeah.
Y'all are the worst.
I will mute you.
I regret
Okay,
suggesting that. Never mind.
go ahead.
Okay, fine. Paul is problematic enough for us to not try and decide terrible moral things about him that may not be true. I know that's not popular. Like it's really fun to just be able to say like he was the worst person possible. He's a con artist. Okay, so there's 2 letters. Well, the Corinthian letters are actually a collection of letters, but there is writing in that where he's thanking people for their contributions. The Philippian letter is also a letter where he's thanking people for their contributions. If we're looking at those letters as an example of him being a con artist, I think we're just looking for reasons to not like him. Just decide we don't like him and leave it alone. Like just decide we think he's fucked up and he's a bad person and leave it alone. But there is not textual evidence from these various letters to suggest that he is actively and intentionally being dishonest. But what we do find, and this is interesting, is in the Corinthian letter, I think it's 2 Corinthians, it might be 1st. I'm pretty sure it's 2 Corinthians though. He talks about thanking them for their contributions. It is the only time we find him mentioning thanking for contributions that might suggest that it was for him specifically. It is an example of him talking to one church. We don't necessarily find it from others. I think if we make a universal case for any of Paul's letters as some kind of like gospel inerrantist view, right? It's just like, this is, he never takes it ever, unless he suggests he's talking to like the Ephesian church or whatever. There's no reason to think that he had the same approach to all of his churches. It is reasonable to suggest that he might have been willing, or it might have been rude to refuse a donation from some spaces. That is probably more likely in an Eastern view than that he was just a blatant con artist. Like, I think that's a little bit more of a reach than to suggest that he was just taking a meaningful donation. As for the Philippian letter specifically, and that's a more clear case, the Philippian letter was specifically written for the purpose of him funding a church, another church that had a famine, and that's why the Philippian letter was written. There's a couple of reasons, but that's one of the reasons it was written. If you're talking about that example, he is thanking them for their donation beforehand because he is believing that they will be generous, not for him specifically, but for another church that has a famine. That is not that is a scholarly consensus. That's not my opinion. As far as the Corinthian letter, that one's interesting and probably more speculative, but I do genuinely think it's a reach to suggest this is proof of him being a con man as opposed to him just accepting the generosity of people. You're on mute. You're
I
still on
told
mute.
you I was going to mute you. Go ahead.
You're not muted now.
Yeah, you're not
You're
muted
not
now.
muted now.
I think you actually turned down your mic though before you were muted.
Now I can't hear you at all. What happened?
There it is.
What happened,
I
Jess?
can hear you now.
It's just like,
I don't
no,
want to know.
fuck y'all. Okay.
Now,
so
to
then
be clear,
going on to...
think he's terrible. Do it. Yes, but do it based on what we have evidence of. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get you.
Yeah. So we have a
I still hate
question
him.
from Wolfhawk. It said, would we even have the evangelical Christianity as we know it today without Paul? In what ways do you think it would be different?
I think we kind of touched on this one earlier. I don't think evangelical Christianity would exist at all without Paul's words. I think it would be very, very
You
different.
don't?
No, I don't think it would be allowed to exist. I don't think what Jesus was doing perpetuates the same kind of different facets we see within the evangelical movement, whether that is mission trips to every single corner of the earth to try to convert people, or whether that is the prosperity gospel, or whether that's purity culture, whether that is being against marriage for gay people, like whatever it is that is kind of like plaguing our society, it's always rooted in somebody misusing Paul's words. And I think that's kind of the entire foundation of the evangelical church. So I don't think it would exist without him.
I agree fully. I would also like to add we would also not have the evangelical church without fundamental shifts in our philosophical understanding of how to read stuff.
Yes.
And that
we
may
did talk
sound
about
less
it.
popular of a take. Like that, you couldn't make a 15-second TikTok off of that. You couldn't. But like, if it weren't for the fundamental philosophical shifts we've had in the past 2,000 years, and there's been a couple, maybe at least two, of philosophical shifts in the past 2,000 years, I also don't think we would read Paul the way that we do if it weren't for those. And I really don't think that, and to be clear, again, hate Paul, do it. Genuinely. Go for it. I'm not suggesting you believe in anything, but what I am saying is, like, if we're going to read history, it gets really fucking complicated real fast. And one of the things that makes it complicated is there have been huge philosophical shifts in how we think we understand the world. And I don't think that, like we wouldn't read Paul the way we would without the Enlightenment. We wouldn't read Paul the way that we do without Constantine. We wouldn't read Paul the way we did without the Reformation. We wouldn't read Paul the way we do if it weren't for the Puritans hating Catholics. That's a weird thing in America. Like, the Puritans just like, fuck those people. We wouldn't read Paul the way we would if they wasn't for the Puritans and, push back against the Church of England, loving Aristotle. Like, it's not... we need to make it as complicated as possible if we're going to be responsible with history. And if we're going to be people that are committed to truth, let's make it as complicated as fucking possible. Let's not pretend it's simple. Let's not make any villains out of people that aren't villains.
I'm committed to justice and vigilantism, and I want to go back in time and kill Paul.
Wait, so are
You have a
JeGaysus
marketing
Batman?
campaign for cancel Paul shirts. I don't
I
want to hear
have
anything
a
about your
marketing
justice
campaign.
I'm
Your shirts
committed
are probably made
to
in sweatshops. I don't want
pettiness.
to hear it.
To pettiness.
that's
See, there
it.
you go.
Bye.
Hey.
Definitely need to make the y'all need JeGaysus merch for sure. That needs to be
I'll
added.
buy that shirt.
I don't know why I never even
I
thought
will
about
buy
that.
that shirt too.
I have
could've
10
bought
designs on my
me to make a
website,
Daddy
and
Paul
I
shirt.
never even thought of that. That's too cute. Okay.
Love it.
Do we have any other
Okay,
questions?
so next question. Do you think Paul should be canceled for his stance on slavery?
It's
Jess looks like-
complicated.
Oh.
So I have a lot of thoughts and feelings on this, right? Because, like, I am very much of the opinion that if you support slavery, you're just a fucked up idiot.
It's a good opinion.
But I am very much speaking from a perspective in which I have history and context and all of these other things. And we do have slavery, but not in the same way. So I am conflicted about canceling everything Paul ever said over a viewpoint that was 100% normal in his time. Do I think it was right? No, I don't think it was right. However, like, are we expecting do we cancel Thomas Jefferson? Like, do we cancel everybody that ever owned a slave? Like, do I think fucking Thomas Jefferson was right? No, I don't. But do I think that, like, everything he ever said or did was fucking god awful and should be canceled? Also, like, questionable, right? Like, there's layers to this shit. Am I wrong?
No, like,
I think you're right.
I think a legitimate thing that we need to address at some point is that
Wait,
a lot
how
of us
are we not monetized? Neil is trying to spend his
We don't have
dollar bills.
enough
We're at
hours
like
yet.
we need
Once
like
we have more
14.
hours.
So watch our stuff,
You'll
guys.
just
If you want us to get
spend on me.
monetized, we need to get to 4,000 watch hours. We're about 1,200 away.
So, like, one thing that we probably need to address at some point is there has been a legitimate existential trauma behind a lot of our foundations when it comes to religion, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and that existential trauma cannot have a zero effect on how we talk about this stuff. Me included, right? Like, there are probably some arguments where I would want to, like, justify things that I probably shouldn't. And I'm aware of that. Like, and that's the reason I'm like, don't believe this. That's fine. Whatever. Like, I'm still processing that, right? I was talking to someone actually today about Paul in this way about slavery. May I share that conversation a little bit?
Please do.
Sure.
So,
My drunk ass will be over
if
here.
I was talking to, like, someone who needed the Bible to still be inerrant, this is what I would say to them. In the letter to Philemon or Philemon, whatever, you find an argument for the value of Onesimus. By the letters to Timothy, we find mention of Onesimus being the pastor of the church of Ephesus. The way that inerrantists interpret that transition is that the rhetoric of Paul was used for the purpose of the freedom of the slave. That is how that rhetoric has been used by a number of theologians and a number of pastors. That's how I'd say to an inerrantist who needs these letters to be by Paul and needs these letters to be in a pretty order where everything's clean and cut. The way that I would say this to not an inerrantist, to someone who's just trying to deal with the shit, is for whatever reason, there is something about Paul that has had a specific value in Black theology, in womanist theology, and in Mujarista theology. That's, womanist Hispanic theology. And in their theology, that also ties to Paul. For whatever reason, they find liberation in him. And the primary rhetoric, the primary language of womanist theology, which I was reminded of today, and I'm grateful for Rev Raya for reminding me of this, because I was having a conversation about wrestling with oppression in the Bible, was the purpose of womanist theology is, what is this text doing to you and your people? And for whatever reason, there are people of color that find their center and a rhetoric that bolsters and emboldens their liberation in this text that a lot of white people point out justify slavery. And I'm not saying that is a clear argument. I'm saying that is something to hold in tension, and I think it's an important thing to hold in tension.
And that's fair. My rebuttal to that is, I know we're kind of moving out of the debate format, but my rebuttal to that still stands from earlier. I think we very much could have had, those movements would have still been happening without Paul's existence. He's not the one who spurred those movements. And I think they would have found that solace in other writers. I don't think
they could have found that in the Torah without any of these
that.
writings.
Exactly.
I don't disagree.
Exactly.
Or
Jesus's words, because he's supposed to be the religion.
So what I think is really interesting is there is liberation foundations in Jesus, but I find in my experience and in my readings, we find more feminist readings in Jesus than we do liberationist readings in Jesus.
Well, yeah, because he's trans. So.
That might be it. But so
where are you at, Greg Locke? You haven't called me out yet.
No, so real talk, the strongest argument against Paul, that I cannot do anything with, is I don't know, and I was reminded of this today as well when I was talking to a friend, is that there really is not a what is this text doing to you for your better from a feminist perspective when it comes to Paul. Doesn't exist, which is fascinating to me. And so we got to deal with that. And that's probably so. I gave you your winning point. There it is.
Thank you.
Okay. So I do want to, because we want to start wrapping this up. So I am going to be a little bit more direct with hey, answer the question and shut the fuck up.
I have a quick question though.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Sorry. So I know personally, deep inside, JeGaysus, you need to go. Soonsies.
Yes.
I want to know, honestly, Andrew, if you're open to staying and answering a few more questions, or if you want to
can I take a bathroom break?
Yes.
The answer is
I
yes.
feel there are questions that are worth answering, and I also think that Matt can go eat food and sleep.
Why don't we do this? Why don't we have so wait, do you need to go to the restroom right now?
Me?
I can hold it.
Oh,
Okay, why don't we do the
You're like
closings? So
me.
do both 5-minute closings. That way, Matt,
Yes.
JeGaysus can go. And
I don't feel like
then
we even
we'll
need to
go-
like close. I feel like we kind of closed in the
I
questions.
feel like we've all won.
I feel like we should just take a vote and say, I win. That's it.
Hey,
Or we can close the poll and see how that went.
I think that there is justification in living a life without the rhetoric of Paul.
All right, guys. So the poll says 69% voted for cancel Paul, and that's just beautiful.
69.
69.
69.
That makes me
You
feel
could
like
not
we
be
all
more
won.
perfect.
If it's 69%, I think we all win.
Yeah. Well,
we're all
it's
for
mutual.
sure
It's a
won.
That is
mutual
just
winning happening right there.
I don't know a
Oh.
single person who is familiar with that opportunity and was just like highlight of my
Nah.
weekend. Not like it's always like it's fine.
It's a win for everyone every time.
It's okay.
Hey.
All right. So then why don't we instead I'm going to take the three of us off, and I'm going to have Matt just kind of do some closing remarks. And then I'll have Andrew do some closing remarks. I know that's the reverse order, but Matt's got to go. I keep
Well,
saying your
I
name. I'm
feel
so
like
sorry.
I've already done the
JeGaysus.
vote, so if like Andrew is open to like doing questions, I'll stay on. He can stay on, and then we can go from there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
I mean, I have no like special knowledge, but I feel like we've had all of our chats.
JeGaysus, was there anything else that you haven't
Yeah.
said about Paul that you want to before you go?
Yeah,
Well, here,
the only thing I
take
would
me
really...
off. Let me go to the bathroom. Let JeGaysus.
No.
Okay,
thank you. Bye, bitch.
Right
No.
mid-sentence. No, I think the only thing I would close with is, the regular thank you everyone for being here. Thank you for
Yes.
like chilling, hanging out. And while I do see Andrew's points in how it can be used for good and how liberation can come to many different groups and it can be a beautiful thing and rhetoric's interesting and historical contributions are great. My only argument is just in a very...
Fuck Paul. You know what I mean?
Yeah, just cancel Paul. In a very modern sense of the word, I don't obviously think you can cancel anybody or remove their works from history. Like, I don't cancel Darwin for being a racist, but I do feel like we need to push back on it and be more vocal. And so I say it in the same way that I dress up as a gay Jesus online, to be extreme enough that people pay attention to it. And I feel like if the church were really wanting to be so focused on social justice, they should be calling it out too. They should be calling out the non-existent scriptures. They should be calling out the way that it's abused when there's actually more historical rhetoric. And it needs to just divorce itself from Paul a little bit. And when I say cancel Paul, I wrap that up into that point of remove him from being this kind of figurehead you need, this figurehead you should listen to. He was a man 2,000 years ago who was misogynistic, who was, by his own words, a killer. You shouldn't hang up all your hopes and dreams on this guy.
Yep. Also, get fucking Pat Lowinger on here to discuss feminism and Paul.
And yes, it was good for me. Thank you, Anjar.
I'm
Make Paul
sorry.
Saul again.
die.
I was going to ask if we wanted to, like, since Matt is... Oh my gosh, I keep doing it. I'm so sorry.
Ooh,
but-
JeGaysus,
When you point it out,
sorry.
it makes it worse because then they're like, oh. Anyone?
his
It's
name
called the
is Pat.
Streisand dilemma. That's the technical term for it, where if you oppose something
Get
too
fucking
loudly.
Pat and Neil on here.
I mean, I can DM them so that way,
Yes,
like,
that's what I said.
since JeGaysus needs to go, I would
Okay.
really love to facilitate a discussion between
Neil, Pat,
and...
what the fuck are y'all doing? Because I know they don't sleep. I know they don't sleep.
JeGaysus, yeah, I think you got to go eat, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I
JeGaysus,
have
go
like a
eat.
whole list of things I need to do.
Yes. Neil is down. Send this man the link.
And also, I'm alive. We were gonna cover that. I'm fine. I don't think we're
Oh
really
yes.
gonna cover it
If
though.
y'all saw the TikTok videos, send us a message. But he's good, and his 5'4" king is somewhere sad. So it's
It's
good.
really sad too because he was kind of hot, but you know,
I know.
He was
but he's
you
hot.
win
just-
some, you lose some.
He was
But-
so pretty.
You didn't see. I don't think anyone got the other guy that was there with the dreads on. He was also actually all three of the guys that were there making noise are just really attractive. It was very interesting. I didn't know if I wanted to debate or like just insert myself into the group of 3 guys that just showed up. But
yourself into
Well, and then
their
they were
what?
like, we want to
Their
anoint you
group.
with
Oh,
oil.
that's
And
the
they're like,
language we
you
went
know,
with here.
so you brought Luke to this situation.
that was I
Cool.
should have made that joke. That was the one thing that I was like, no,
Ow.
because okay, you know what? I will say this before I go. The fact that in that TikTok he was like touching my arm or whatever, and that's what a lot of people like focused on is like, he's touching me, don't touch. Someone said no touchy
Hold my
touchy
hand,
to
bitch.
JeGaysus. But it was funny because I would mirror that energy back. And so the way that he kept touching my shoulders, I would then go and be like, hey, like calm down for a second. And I would put my hand on his shoulder. He's like, don't touch me. Don't touch me. And I was like, you've been touching me this
don't
entire
hold my
time.
hand, ho.
You've been
fuck?
touching me. I thought this was like how we are communicating, but like interesting that you're gonna keep yelling that as if I'm like infected. But the one thing that did bother me is not his touching, even the praying. I was like, don't pray for people who don't give you consent. So I tried to test him on that. But I didn't care that much. But the oil, I was like, I don't know where that oil's been. I don't know what you're trying to rub. He had homemade oil that he was like, let me anoint you with this oil as well after the prayer. And I was like, absolutely not. That's
I have great news.
Well, and then
if a
the
Christian wants to anoint
parents-
you with oil, that is some
That-
serious oil. They're not
My
going to fuck
TikTok
around
didn't
with
show that. The parents that like
On your way to the airport, bitch, where are you going? I mean, Pat.
It was just. Well, if you just said that, I would have been like, okay.
I mean, hey, love it. Neil, if you want to send me your Skype or whatever, however you want to do it, because I have Neil on Facebook. I don't have him on Skype, but I have y'all on Skype, and I don't have so. Bye,
Okay.
JeGaysus.
I'm gonna send
Bye.
it to
I love everybody.
Just
Bye.
I love you too.
atone for my soul. Love you so much, Andrew. You're staying on.
Okay.
Okay.
I have wine.
I'll watch your wrap up like tomorrow too, just
So-
to see what happened. Shit, talk
Whatever
me
you
after I
said.
get off.
Bye.
I'll
Eat some
know.
food. No, eat some food,
Goodbye.
bitch.
Bye.
Bye.
All right. Neil, check your DMs on Twitter. And then
Bro, Pat lives in Indiana Jones expedition, but Neil's my boy. So
This
let's
was
get him
so
on here.
fun. I wasn't
was.
sure it was going to be like, but this was fun. I enjoyed this.
I'm glad because it can be really difficult to be the only theist in a discussion sometimes.
But like,
I mean,
I would
yeah.
throw hands for you, just FYI.
Right.
Ooh, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we're just waiting on Neil. So I'm gonna bring up some of the questions that and I think we addressed this one a little bit, but so I mean, because you were talking about this, but it was from Kate
yes.
saying would like to hear more about what Andrew mentioned about Paul's influence on liberation theology.
Liberation.
Yeah. So if I wanted to like just start off and be like, here's my sales pitch for liberation theology, there's a really good case to be made here. I'm going to try and do it more even keeled than that. If it weren't for Paul having such a high influence on Christianity, there probably would not be a Pauline influence on liberation theology. So where does liberation theology come from?
South America.
We find that there are primarily two and then later three sources of liberation theology. The first being Latin American liberation theology coming out of various contexts, including that of El Salvador. We find that of we find
Colombia.
Gustavo Gutierrez, who is not Salvadoran, but we find Oscar Romero, who is a theologian and archbishop of El Salvador, being the primary theological voice of liberation theology. What's really interesting that's happening in this time period is we find a more secularized El Salvador and other religions and other like regions as well, other nations as well, deciding that they want to adopt a mercantilist capitalist structure like the United States.
Yeah,
So they're
fuck
trying to
imperialism.
secularize themselves. They're trying to make themselves more structured around. Hi.
What's going on, guys?
What up, Neil?
Oh, hi, Neil.
How's
Welcome
everyone
to
doing?
the show.
I'm Andrew. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Andrew. Seen you around.
Usually it's Neil inviting me, welcoming me to his show, but here we are. So
Right,
Are
right.
we on his
messy
show
ass
right now?
Bullshit.
No. That would be a good
No,
idea.
so if you've ever seen me post like Gnostic Informant, it's because he's been brave enough to have my messy fucking ass on his show, shitting on everybody.
A few times.
Dude,
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
he's a good guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just joined like about 10, 15 minutes ago. Caught the end of that discussion. It was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
I
The last time I was on his so Andrew, are you remotely caught up on the Robert Price drama?
no.
Oh my God. Someone
No.
told me. I may have caused some problems. I know you probably can't imagine that.
You strike me as a
I am
very
shooketh.
peacekeeping person.
Very what?
You seem very like
Peacekeeping.
easygoing and
That's me.
non-confrontational.
Yeah, no
Neutral.
problem.
You know, like basically when I
It's
think of you, I
fine.
think of a Quaker.
Switzerland in pink hair.
Hey, Joe. You know what? Fuck y'all.
Hey, real quick, Kate Murphy.
Yes, please.
Latin American
Continue.
liberation theology finds its root in a really interesting space that Christians in America are not familiar with, because there is a quickly secularizing, mercantilist, capitalist environment coming out of El Salvador and Honduras and these other nations within Latin America as we know it today. And the voice for liberation actually comes from within the church, specifically these priests, bishops, and archbishops from these various regions. What's particularly interesting is that these capitalist people that are getting their notes from America and even hiring American mercenaries, that's a whole different story, I'll tell you that in a second, are killing these bishops and priests for speaking out against these nations. These priests and bishops are finding themselves like there are people from these parishes and these cathedrals finding their priests in dumpsters shot in the head for speaking out against the nation. That is a commonality, especially there's this wonderful movie called Romero, and it's the story of Oscar Romero. It is 100% accurate. It is a fantastic film about the life of Oscar Romero. One of the fascinating things about his story is that an American mercenary shot him in the head during high mass, which led to the Salvadoran Civil War. Basically, the people through the Catholic Church fighting for their freedom. So what is fascinating is that these pastors find themselves with their rooting in the Torah and in Pauline literature. Those two spaces specifically. Jesus is also a piece, but I would say that Jesus is more of a secondary to Paul when it comes to liberation theology within Latin American liberation theology. We also find the undergirding for Martin Luther King Jr., Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., to be James Cone, who wrote Black Liberation Theology and The Cross and the Lynching Tree. Every American needs to read Cross and the Lynching Tree. It'll fuck you up. It is a fantastic text because it compares the crucifixion of Jesus as a body of color under an imperial state to the lynching tree of the United States. If you haven't read that book,
What is it called?
You can't get over like the
It's called The Cross and the Lynching Tree by James Cone.
I'm about
The
to
text
order
is
it right
fucking
now.
amazing.
It is. It'll change your life.
It will change your life. And so like Paul has a prophetic image of a world that we today have not achieved. I am not advocating for Paul holistically. I'm suggesting that this is a thing of prophetic literature.
It is a framework that sort of conceptualizes beyond what he could have imagined.
Exactly.
But his sort of like, look, I have no strong opinion on Paul. I think he was regressive in a lot of ways. I think he was progressive in a lot of ways. But I think that his idea of like this sort of futuristic viewpoint, whether you want to qualify that as Jewish apocalyptic literature, right? Or like whatever, he had this kind of vision of a future that was so much better than the here and now. And I think that if you can sort of separate that notion from like the society he was living in and sort of understand his viewpoint as like a progressive theology for the time he was living in.
Yeah.
Whether or not
Yeah.
it's progressive for us, it's 2,000 years later. How could it be? But
Yeah.
I've had a
that's
scholar-
different, right?
I've had a scholar tell me that he would have been labeled as an SJW to like
Yes.
people right wingers today. If they were living back then, they would have called Paul an SJW.
Couldn't be
without a doubt,
me.
So
Well,
we
the
have a
thing with
desire
James,
in like
James was because that was one of the funniest things you said from the drunk shenanigans episode was you said
Oh,
that like
God.
James was kind of like a leftist where it's like,
Kill me.
you know, like if you don't fucking help the poor, I'm gonna burn you alive. Like it was
Yeah.
like,
that's James.
Samesies, bitch.
James,
Like,
well, this is attributed to James, whoever wrote James, which I think the reason why they named it James is because it was very James-like, even if James didn't write it. But it
Jamesian.
says even the demons have faith. What does that mean? Faith without works is dead.
Like, what a fucking badass whoever wrote
Right.
whoever wrote James was fine with getting fired tomorrow.
Right.
It's the equivalent of going, I'm gonna drunk send this email to my boss because fuck it. That's who wrote James. So I want to say
Send me
something.
to HR, bitch. Fuck around and find out. Yeah.
Right.
I
That's a
think
good
this
point.
is something we struggle with today, and I'm not suggesting that we need to go back to this space, but I think this is something we miss. We, as people who try to intellectually approach historical literature, forget that these people were mystical.
Right.
They believed in spirits. They believed in spirits of the air. I don't care what you thought about those things. That's not my. They thought these things, and these people were often ethnic communities who were oppressed. Often, these people, when they wrote about imagery that tied to the Exodus, they were tying themselves to a people who were hoping for freedom. And when they wrote about worlds, they wrote about worlds that are freer than the one we live in that we could hope for. And so what a lot of people that approach these texts in a mystical way find is they find themselves being able to look at the past and the future at the exact same time, because they can tie themselves to a historical people that yearn for a world the way you yearn, looking to a future you have yet to achieve that has the capacity to see all men and women equal, where there is no immigrant and there is no nationalist, where there are all people of the same value. So like when we find, so to answer your question, Kate, when Paul says there is no longer slave nor Jew, there is no longer Greek nor Jew, slave nor free, man nor woman, he is comparing power statuses of legitimacy and illegitimacy.
However, if you read Jennifer Glancy, you will then see that the way that slaves were described in the New Testament writings were very much just like bodies, without what is the word I'm looking for? Bodies without a sort of like individual worth. So there is a conflict, there is a tension that is held there, and that's not me contradicting Andrew. I think both things are true.
He's using that image, and he's using a lot of like really fucked up language there, including when he says Greek nor Jew. He's using basically two racial slurs when he talks about that. So like, wait. So the way the liberationist reads that is they see a yearning for a world where the worst of this group and the worst of this group do not find themselves defined by their differences, but by their unions. That is Paul's contribution to liberation theology. The end.
Paul, you fucking raging homosexual. No judgment. Just like live your best life because you only got one. You know what I'm saying?
Is that a thorn in your side, or are you just happy to see me?
I was going to say, me personally, it's not a thorn in my side, but it was certainly a thorn in Paul's side.
I just need you to know that I've made that joke to myself or in the text like 3 times. I had to say it out loud for my own well-being.
Thorn in your
Now we
side.
can move on.
Happy to see me. Yeah. I just feel like I'm just like making a series of terrible jokes.
Well,
Just,
are
like,
there more
pretty much
questions or?
Yeah, Rion, where are you? Dog, come on. The fuck?
I mean, even the letters that Paul. Oh, hey, what's up?
He said, "Hey, girl, what's up?"
I'm like, what the? Can you hear me okay?
Oh,
Okay. Yeah. It wouldn't let me access. It kept saying it was blocking me.
ugh. Anyway,
I love your
longer have-
plants. Good grief.
Yeah, I have a lot.
Same days, girl. Same
I'm a
days.
huge fan.
Yeah,
Just not
I
in this
love my
room.
plants.
It's dope.
They make me happy.
So, Rion, how do you feel about Paul personally? I need to know.
Oh, it's
Do you
not
have
clear.
any strong?
It's-
There's this guy named Paul. Do you have any strong opinions at all about?
Oh,
Tell me more.
what do I think about Paul? As I call him, the apostate Paul. You know, I do try to have respect for him because I get that there's a lot about him that isn't actually his work, that changes his message. So I'm trying to break him down a little bit, and I kind of do feel a bit better about him, but I still just feel like he's a murderer. So it's really difficult for me to see beyond that. Like, you know, a murderer just comes along and is like, hey, I'm a citizen and I like this church you got going on.
To be honest,
got a
I
better way
think
to
a
do it.
lot of Roman citizens were probably murderers, if we're being honest. This is not me defending Paul. That's
In a
simply me
world where
saying the
women are
Roman
not
Empire was
people,
fucking wild.
You're
there
not
were
wrong.
a lot of murders.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot of people out there just like
Yeah.
Well, I
More than
think.
you.
hey,
Well, I
R.I.P.,
was thinking
bitch.
about your. I watched your videos earlier a couple of times because it was a really good example of polemics, right?
me
Like
or her?
no, it was good. Like I was just thinking
No.
through it and
But
like
who?
if we're gonna make a stance about what is problematic in the world, it's really you can't really say, well, to be even keeled. You can't do that. You gotta go all the way in,
Me?
and you did,
Even-keeled?
and like,
Not in this lifetime, bitch.
and that's meaningful. Like one of these days, we're gonna find a way to make an interesting episode about just polemics in general, like making like hard stances and why that's beneficial to presenting ideas, you know, because that's important. Otherwise, we can't really get things across in a world where there are so many ideas in the first place.
Right.
Mhm.
Does that make sense, Neil?
Yeah. It's an effective way to get an idea out there.
Neil,
To be
get
heard
in
at
here.
all,
Yeah.
frankly.
Share your thoughts and opinions.
I like what Pat said because that's pretty much how I feel in many ways. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut off the comment, but just determining like what is really his thoughts. Because
That's
No,
hard.
we're sorry. It was just all of us putting Neil on the spot. No.
Come on now.
Let's go
Neil,
back to
all
that.
of your thoughts,
Hello?
but make it good immediately.
You got 30
No
seconds.
pressure.
Just
It's
give
just
it- give us
me
a-
pressuring
Was
Neil.
Paul anti-feminist? Not as bad as
Oof.
many believe he was, but
Sorry, what is misattributions?
Googling new fucking
It's
words.
misattributions. Love you so
Attribution?
much, Pat. So I think that's a really hard question because we have this modern idea of what a feminist is that nobody before us would have had any concept of, right?
No.
So do I think that Paul was anti-feminist as we define it today? Sure. Absolutely. But that could be said of anybody throughout the last 2,000 years. Like they were anti-feminist, right? Like when did we define this notion? Also, how are we defining feminist? Are we defining it as what we think today in 2022? Or are we thinking about feminist as progressive for the time period? And I'm not saying like what
Right.
the correct answer is at all. But I think that if we judge everybody by our modern standards, nobody will ever meet the mark.
Yeah.
May I add to
To
that?
that, you know. Oh, sorry.
Please
Go
do.
ahead.
Yeah.
You add to that, Correa.
Somebody
Well,
else,
so what I
please.
was gonna say is because like so by today's standards, like Abraham Lincoln was a very racist man. Like we have
He
quotes of him
was.
saying
Yes.
he
Right.
was like we have quotes of him saying that he never wanted the black people to have equal rights as white people. He just didn't want them to be enslaved. And it's like that in itself was a very progressive stance, but that still doesn't take the fact, it's like, yes, but by today's standards, that is absolutely 100% super fucking racist.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I think that
Let's move.
we have to hold space for these things, right? So, like, we have to be able to say that, like, yes, we fundamentally disagree with this bullshit ass position, but we also recognize that in this day and age, people were so ass backwards that this position was somehow progressive, right? Doesn't make it right, just means it was controversial for the time.
Like,
And I think there's like a tension there. Correct me if I'm wrong.
no, what? So there is no reasonable way that we could say that Paul was advocating for the equal rights of women.
Of course not.
But also, it'd be difficult to suggest that Paul was advocating for any kind of political rights at all. I don't think that we find. This isn't an argument for Paul. This is just I don't think many of us can frame
General
ourselves in a
contextual
world.
argument.
To what?
A general contextual argument.
Yeah, like I don't think many of us can imagine a world where there is no capacity for rights if our leader didn't give a shit. Not really. Like, not in the way that emperors worked. And so what's difficult is that what we have of Paul is nothing more than letters to what he would consider his people. That's the best we got.
Yeah.
There is no reason that we would think that he even had in his mind the capacity of suggesting there could be legitimized rights through legislation.
Well, like, can you even imagine a space in which you exist under Roman control where you thought that you had any way to enact change?
Not on a fundamental scale. That was never, like, there was nothing of early Christianity that we can say is like that's even a thought. They believed that some kind of like cosmological change would happen to create that because they didn't have a fucking chance.
But like even beyond Christians, right? Like if you went just to poor Romans, right? Like the only people that could ever enact change in that society were wealthy elites. That's it. Full stop. Like the Senate, and even if you were in the Senate, it would have to be like you'd have to have majority and you have to have a lot of money and a lot of sway. It's not like today where it's like, all right, we're going to take a vote. Like you might take a vote in the Roman Senate, but it's not. It is not a 1-to-1 with the way things go today, right? Like, and today it's corrupt too, but like it certainly wouldn't be like a fair vote. It was very much the optimates versus the populares, and like
Paul's got to have some sort of money, though, doesn't he? Don't you think?
I mean that's a
Say that
an
again. I'm
argument
sorry.
I
I
can't
didn't
make.
hear you.
I just said that Paul's got to have some sort of money, don't you? Don't you think? I mean, I don't know. Of course, we have no idea to what extent, but I mean, he's related to the Herods, and
So
he's traveling a lot
obviously
too.
he's traveling around ripping people out of synagogues. I don't know where he's getting the money to travel. Is he backed by the Roman government? Like, is somebody paying for him to do this? This is just something he's doing on his own accord.
can I add a complication to that piece?
Please.
Make it more complicated?
That's why I love talking about this stuff, because I don't know. I ask myself these questions and I can only
Same.
assume the worst, you know?
It's just
So,
me
like-
talking shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Talking shit in my head.
There's
All my
this.
personalities.
So one of the things that makes it really complicated with Paul, especially with the book of Romans, is the 14 chapter hypothesis, which suggests that like there were two versions of the book of Romans. And from best we can tell by authors like Tertullian and Origen, there was a version of Paul's letter to the Romans that only had 14 chapters instead of 16. And if that's the case, and there's a semi-decent case, a fairly strong case, not an ironclad, but a fairly strong case to suggest that there was only a 14-chapter version of Romans for the Western Roman Empire. For the first, and not for a little while, I'm talking about like for the first 4 centuries. The first like 3 to 4 centuries. If that's the case, there is not a cohesive testament to Paul as a Herodian being perpetuated throughout the Roman world. So, and there is not, if that is the case, and I'm not suggesting it is, but I'm saying it's complicated, right? It's complicated at best. And if Paul is a Herodian, half the Roman world didn't fucking know about it.
I would also would like a little clarification, because the Herods pretty much ceased to exist after what's his name, Archelaus, when he was deposed. So then
the Benjamites or whatever were like the prior line that led to the Herodians, or like an offshoot of the Herodians. So like, it's possible that Herodians were used as like a colloquial phrase for like this like sub community of Benjamites.
Sure, but then by the time Jesus came around, we had Quirinius, who was a proconsul of Syria. So like, who is then? There's no real.
There aren't really like Herodians like a familial status after like the 1st century BCE. And then leading into the 1st century, maybe at best, maybe.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of the Roman
I'm not trying to be argumentative. I'm trying to like clarify.
Well, it's just fucking complicated. Like we can't like suggest.
Sorry, Neil.
No, you're good.
Like it is not, and this is the reason it's not a scholarly consensus, because like outside of like this one mention, maybe I think it's in chapter 16 of the book of Romans.
16:11 is where he says, "Meet my relative, the Herodian." Is that what you're talking about?
The Herodian.
Yeah, I was just gonna say the fringe position of Roman Providence, which only a few people are behind. They point to that single verse as, "Look, he was a Herodian." And it's really weak, in my opinion.
And that's the reason it's not scholarly consensus right there, is because like, and also like add to that,
Pat is big mad in the chat.
Tertullian and Origen.
Where's the chat? Like,
Get him, Pat. Get him.
As far as like Western Roman theology, we really don't find Origen or Tertullian acknowledging the last 2 chapters of Romans. And it is such a consistency within these 2 authors that it is reasonable to suggest there were 2 versions of Romans, one of them with this ending that we suggest of 15 and 16, and the other, and another reason also, rhetorically speaking, the book of Romans, if we stop it at 14, it goes through a full rhetorical cycle. It addresses what it wants to in the beginning, and then it ends in chapter 14, and it's done.
It makes more sense that way, too. And
it really does.
And then it just like starts back up again, and it's doing something else. Like, I agree with you on that. It makes a lot more sense. So
it's like
he's concluding his whole entire whatever he's saying in 14.
So this is what makes it complicated. If we're right? Why was it important to certain people to apply Paul as a Herodian? Why was that relevant to certain communities? And why would they want to suggest that in the Eastern Roman world?
Because Paul would have been writing before the destruction of the temple.
Right. So why was this?
They also said he studied under Gamaliel, which isn't anything he said either. So is that just to boast who he was as a person?
I feel like there's a lot of tension leading up to this destruction of the temple, where it wasn't just like the rebellion of the Jews happened, right? Like, there's going to be a ton of tension. And so you have all of this where it's like, why would you be loyal to Herod? And it's like, well, whatever. I can't remember his name. Archelaus? I think Archelaus was his son's name. He was deposed because he's a piece of shit. But prior to that, the Jews were paying taxes to Herod, Herod was then distributing them to the Roman Empire, but it was still very much like a Jewish rulership. And so I feel like you could see this tension where it's like, okay, we're now under a proconsul, but like before this, we were loyal to a Jewish ruler. And now we're seeing that there are these strains of rebellion towards the Roman Empire, right? So like you could see a point in which someone would be positioned as a Herodian, and that would be like a good thing.
Can I backtrack there? Because
Please
there's this
do.
really fucking weird thing. Like, Christians love to paint the Pharisees as like this anti-Semitic image.
Oh God! Not me on Twitter every day telling Christians to quit using Pharisee
as a it's
Not
derogatory. Thank you.
If it weren't for the Pharisees, the Romans would have completely stripped the Jewish people. Well,
that's a fact.
Also, like, okay, can I riff for like a hot second? Because like,
yeah.
Okay, so the term Jew is not cohesive the way a lot of us Protestant Christian ascendant folk think that it is, right? Like, so the word Jew is an abbreviation of Judahite coming from Judah, Judah being one of the 12 tribes. So the tribe of Judah, you might have heard that, the Lion of Judah, that's the thing. So tribe of Judah, that's where the term comes from, until we eventually have these two kingdoms, Israel and Judea. When there's a transition from the 12 tribes to Judea, we find this term being changed from like a familial name of the Judahites to what. And granted, there is some actual like slur affiliation with Judahite. I'm not going to address that just yet. I'm just trying to move through history.
Right.
So there's a transition from the 12 tribes to this national identity to suggesting you're a Judahite is saying I am from the line of Abraham, but I am not from Israel. Okay. And it is not until like the 2nd century, maybe like within the 2nd century, late 1st, 2nd century, we find the term Jew as an abbreviation for all of these people that consider themselves of one of these 12 tribes. And what I think we do is we reduce this incredibly complex ethnic community within a very small space into one name, as if they're all cohesively agreeing. They all have the same theology, the same politics, and that's not the case. So what we do is we say, there's Jesus, one of the Jews. No. Jesus is a Galilean Israelite in the Second Temple period, who is not from the tribe of Judah or the nation of Judah, but comes from the nation of Israel, who would consider himself an Israelite. He is also from the lower region in Gamela, which is Nazareth instead of Galilee. That's where he's from. So, like, Jesus is not, in that sense, a Jew. He is a Second Temple Israelite under Roman campaign from the low region of Gamela, being Nazareth. And the reason I think it's worth mentioning is because I think what we've done is we have looked backwards from a lens of cohesion to suggest that this entire community that has been persecuted, that we now call the Jews, is one group, when back then it was actually, we really don't have reference until like the 2nd century that Jew being an abbreviation for this entire people from Abraham. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it doesn't make sense. But isn't there something to do with the 10 tribes in the north being dispersed also? Something along those lines?
Yeah. There's and like, if you go even back further, like the nomadic history of these people doesn't even place them within this region of the world, and so they're like a nomadic tribe. I think what we've done, and I think it helps. I love that. I think what we've done is we have allowed one element, well, many elements, but this particular element of persecution of Jewish people to remain, which is continuing to pretend that there was a cohesive community that was in no way complex and was completely two-dimensional, and it was the Jews. And what if we learned that there was a vibrant community that associated themselves with Abraham?
Right.
They came from all over the fucking
Yeah.
place.
Right.
From the high
Isn't that
country and the low
entirety
country.
of the Bible?
Yeah.
The whole Bible is a tapestry that they made it like a black and white piece of paper in the Bible. That's like, they turned this beautiful interwoven into
And
something
like,
very plain.
and like, I love Origin, but Origin has this like big issue where like one of the things that he says is like, you read the entire Bible in light of the last chapter. And he's talking about reducing it to like Jesus revealing the scrolls, so to speak. And so like he reduces everything into this like black and white, there's villains and there's heroes kind of like perspective of theology. And I can see why that benefits a Christian worldview where you're wanting to talk about salvation. And I can see how that's a beneficial argument. But what in that we have done cultural erasure as well. And Jesus would not have considered himself a Jew. He would have considered himself a low country Israelite in Gamala under Roman occupation.
Yeah. Or I mean,
Good point.
even the title Galilean is better suited for, because he's Jesus the Galilean. You know, that's where he's from.
Yeah.
I will say it's a very simple TikTok, but one of my favorite TikToks of yours ever was where you explaining how saying the Jews killed Jesus is not historically accurate and it's propaganda, and here's what is an accurate way
I hate
to.
that.
Oh yeah, I know, me too.
I just
So that's like one of my favorite TikToks of yours.
Which led to
you
a lot
posted that recently too, and I really
Because
appreciate
someone
that.
was being super anti-Semitic, and I was just like, well, and he was like, well, I have my master's in theology, and I'm like, okay, so if you speak an
From the
elitist,
wrong
I'm going to
fucking
speak
school.
elitist back. So here's my friend who has his master's in historical theology, who is explaining exactly why what you are saying is very inappropriate and anti-Semitic.
So the greatest humbling lesson that I ever received in school was from my professor of New Testament. He has 2 PhDs, one in Pauline Greek and the other in Greek rhetoric. That's his PhDs. And he said, I know some of the Gospels. And what he meant is it wasn't a PhD focus. And I'm like, oh, that's the scale we're measuring ourselves on now. I'm a gnat. And he said, Jesus wasn't a Jew. And then he broke down the ethnic history of Jesus into basically a paraphrase of what I just said. And I went, oh, that's the scale we're operating on now. We're operating under like the ethnic complexity and the economic complexity of the first century world. And like, that's, if we're going to honor these documents, we're going to treat them with dignity. And if there's one thing that's going to like nuke your anti-Semitism, that'll fucking do it. Like that'll like erase everything that you've been brought up with. So
Also,
yeah.
I'm just living for Aaron's comment that Andrew explaining things is the ASMR that he's here for.
I didn't know I had like a market in that, and I'm happy to hear that.
Anyway,
Paul has
narrated an audiobook.
Pat has a pretty interesting comment about the Palestinian Jew thing.
Yo, Pat, what are you doing? Get in here. Oh wait, he's picking up his wife from the airport.
Interesting.
Yeah, so like we have to decide if we're gonna paint Paul as a Pharisee or a Hellenized Jew. Like that is a cultural tension.
Right.
And I'm not saying like you can't be both. I'm just saying like it is unlikely you're both. Is he a Pharisee?
Do you think it's true that when they say in like the book of Acts, for example, it says that he was raised up by the foot of Gamaliel, or do you think they're just saying that to make him legitimate? Because that's an interesting claim right there. Because that would put him directly. Gamaliel's grandson.
Gamaliel also argued
the
that there
grandson
was
of
like
Hillel the Elder.
6 genders.
Hillel the Elder is the one who said the whole Torah summed up is love your neighbor, the golden rule. That is the Torah. Everything else is just commentary. That's what he says.
Oof.
And I probably just butchered it, but he says something along those lines. Now, Gamaliel is his grandson. So if Paul's being taught by Gamaliel, is that what they're trying to do by putting him there, maybe?
one of my struggles with the Book of Acts is if you decide that the through line is the journey of Paul's legitimacy, it gets a little too obvious.
Yeah.
Like if you read the Book of Acts, deciding that it's like if Frodo was Paul, and this is Paul, like achieving all his shit, right?
Right.
It's a little too obvious.
Like this court case that he stands in front of Agrippa with we should have evidence of this, physical evidence. I mean, something, right? Like,
yeah, we should, but we don't.
no.
And I wonder why that is.
In my opinion, I think the Book of Acts was written in a very similar way to the Gospels, where they wanted to make big theological points, and so they created narratives for the purpose of justifying those theological points. I don't hear it enough, but we often attribute the writing of Luke and Acts as the same author. I don't understand why that isn't disputed more. I think that Atheist TikTok could have a really fun time with that, frankly.
Yeah.
It's there is no fucking way that these two were written by the same dude.
Dale C. Ellis
Jr.
just recently told me on my channel that he thinks the reason why it is that way, and to what you said, why you think it might be, he thinks it's a rolling text, whereas there might have been an original version of Luke Acts, but then over time it kept getting tinkered with and added on, and things interpolated and changed, and then over time you have Luke, and then you have Acts.
So I agree with that if we read it the way we did Isaiah, right? Like as one author.
Not Isaiah.
The last
3 books of Isaiah.
Right. As a theological cipher where one picks up with the next stanza,
adding to another.
Acts feels like it's 2 different books sometimes.
And I think that's why it was assembled that way, right? Because Acts is a very meaningful. There's some really fascinating things that happen in Acts that I'm just that's really culturally relevant. We need to pay attention to that. But then there's also other pieces of it.
It's just fucking sideways.
And is
what
it
is
just
happening
me?
here?
Is it just me?
Y'all needed a plot point. Why did you add that?
Right. Does it feel like the first half is about Peter, and then all of a sudden it just jumps off of Peter? Forget about Peter. Now we're talking about Paul.
Forget about the fucking cornerstone of the church. Fuck that bitch.
Story.
Yeah,
I genuinely think they needed a way to talk about Antioch, and they didn't even fucking know how. I think what happened is they had to deal with a legitimate historical event, and they had no cultural writing framework to do it. In that time period, anywhere else in the world, there is not a cultural framework to talk about legitimate historical phenomena the way they try to in the Book of Acts. And if we study it from that perspective, it's a fascinating thing, because it might be the first attempt to change a narrative historical approach into a legitimate historical approach. And I'm not saying they nailed it, but
is it honest?
It might legitimately be that thing.
Right. I think
no.
right.
What'd you say, Jess?
Question mark. I said, but is it honest? Nah.
Oh no, definitely not. But
them bitches was lying.
It's like they started off going, we're trying to suggest an idea, but how do we deal with this legitimate history as well? And then they had to deal with each other. That's a weird thing that most literature doesn't fucking deal with.
Yeah.
The likelihood of Paul having any contact with the major figures of history is extremely problematic. The Book of Acts isn't a polemic apologetic. It was a projection of propaganda. Get your ass on this show, Pat.
That's a lot of talk for someone that only goes through text. You gotta step on.
Yeah.
Jess, I thought that would help. If that was me, and I was kidding.
No, it's okay. It's just y'all are both my boys. I don't know what to do anymore.
He's laughing.
I can talk shit, but then if people are offended, I genuinely feel bad.
Never met that person. I have none.
It's so funny because, Andrew, when someone's really offended, you feel bad, and when someone's really offended, I'm like, "That's right, bitch."
I don't have that in me anymore. I don't know why.
And that's what it feels like to
Andrew's just too good for this world.
I know.
I just want everyone to be happy.
I want everyone to lose, except
you're a winner with me, Jess.
Aww.
All right, so I'm gonna just go through the comments, see if there were any other questions that
sorry
we have missed. No, it's been really good really good discussion. And
I still have wine.
Okay. yeah.
You have an entire
So-
jug.
Okay, so
Dog.
here's one
Weed
that I think
somewhere.
I don't know if Kate is still with us, but I thought this was a great question. What do you think Paul would say if he heard a typical straight white evangelical sermon on one of his clobber verses?
Amen, bro.
Great question.
Andrew has feels.
I don't think you'd like it.
But
So-
for like none of the reasons that you would like he
Think
wouldn't
that.
like it, but it wouldn't be for any of the reasons that you
You're
would think he
right.
didn't like it.
Yeah, you're
sorry, I
right.
had to like arrange my words very specifically.
Right.
If you think Paul's going to align with your ideology enough to make you happy, you're wrong. But what I would say is if Paul, one thing that is very clear in the book of Galatians is that Paul takes such an offense to any suggestion that any change of your person comes before understanding of the gospel. Like anything. He is so pissed. Like,
This man was born mad and he died mad.
like
He was. He's a murderer from
anybody
the
else-
inception.
Paul truly needed therapy and he did not get it.
No.
is anybody else queer here? Like,
It's questionable, to be honest.
I am.
okay. So the way that evangelicals approach queer people is to suggest that there is something so fundamentally wrong with them, with me,
Right.
that I need to change the whole nature of my being to be valuable to your service teams, your leadership communities, and to validate the God-given gifts that you believe I have.
Do you have a thorn in your side? Asking
No, I'm just happy to see you.
Okay.
No, but I mean that's essentially what those evangelicals were doing the other day when they were praying for JeGaysus' sodomite spirit.
Oh yeah, because there's nothing valid about him, about JeGaysus. There's nothing value about them if that is present. What Paul would say is, like, when Paul was confronted with the rhetoric of circumcision being needed before you could receive the gospel, he said, fucking castrate yourselves. And like in a performative rhetoric, in a world where 4 to 6% of the world is literate, that would have been said from a stage to everybody, including the people that were advocating for the circumcision. That's some Def Jam comedy shit. That's like hardcore. So like if that Paul that wrote Galatians heard the way that white evangelical
your dick
Christians
off.
treated gay
How do you
people
feel about
today, he would break their fucking jaws. He would have no tolerance for their intolerance and their willingness to suggest that there isn't something good enough about the gospel to be a part of someone's life and the thing to change themselves first. And
It
that
is
is
wild
something that I
out here
actually
in these
like about the
streets.
letter of Galatians. Paul was a petty bitch. He was a petty bitch when it comes to
Bro, I live for the pettiness. Hold on. Before you answer this question, I want you to, Pat, 100% want you to come on and talk to us about any and all things. I think it would be a fascinating conversation to hear your historical perspective across the board. So, like, when you're not sitting in a parking lot waiting for your wife to clear customs, let's get you on here because I'm dying to talk to you. And I think that Andrew and JeGaysus and Correa and literally everybody else feels the same. And if they don't, I'll put them in a headlock.
I specifically want Pat and Andrew in a room together to talk because with his
Yes,
degree,
I would love that.
so
I would
Pat,
love
I don't know how familiar you are with Pat, but he has 2 masters. One is in archaeology and one is in ancient history. And then he's
Nice.
working on getting his PhD. So to have the 2 of you in a
What's the
room
PhD?
together.
You know?
Philosophy.
I think
Pat
it's
HD.
Pat, put it in the comments because I'm probably gonna like fuck it up. But
I mean,
think
you're
it's
amazing.
medical.
Yeah, I am.
Wait, Andrew. Also, he's teaching a class right now. I don't remember the exact title, but it's like magic and early Christianity or something. And I tried to tell you
I'm
about it because I knew
offended
it would be up your
immediately.
fucking alley.
Hey,
I said what I said.
Neil, we don't know each other very well. I don't know if you're familiar with all at all, but like, so I was able to encounter the conversations about magic in the New Testament pretty early on in seminary, and it wrecked
Neil's
my
like,
world.
Okay.
Oh,
I've been
Oh.
like, I've been changed ever since without the altar call, and just like it messed me up, and so I've been having to deal with that.
Neil,
So that's a thing.
That's
I'm
interesting.
simply an asshole, which you know. So.
You're my favorite. I don't think I can
Favorite
say
asshole.
favorite asshole. That's a
Favorite
strange
asshole.
sentence to say.
huh.
And I know it's
Hmm.
going to give you less space.
Andrew still doesn't know what happened with Robert Price, and I feel like maybe perhaps now
Oh,
is not the
what?
time to spill the tea. I don't know.
He doesn't know. Oh. Ah.
Psychohistory.
Yeah, answer the questions. You know?
So I think the reason psychohistory is controversial is because it requires reading new disciplines into old conversations. Psychohistory is this idea that like we can look at the past from a lens of psychological knowledge. And there hasn't always been psychological knowledge, right? We haven't always thought in that way, and it is a fundamentally new discipline. Here's where I think it's useful. And to be clear, this is like I've never taken a class on this thing. I haven't read an article on this thing. I'm familiar with the term. If you have more to say about it, please educate me. I'm not going to pretend I'm educated on this. But my understanding is that it is reading psychology back through history. Okay. I think that is not only a valuable practice, but I have come to the understanding that there is actually a number of biblical disciplines that there are very little writings on now that are like brand spanking new, bleeding edge. There's one of them called trauma-informed theology, which I find fascinating. And it is approaching numbers of theological texts from a trauma-informed perspective, especially Jewish writings. I think y'all might find this interesting. This idea that like when you look at the Babylonian exile, it is a people that have been like ripped away from their culture, ripped away from their language, their names, their religion, their total sense of personhood. What would the traumatic effect be? How can we read the texts following from the Babylonian exile from a trauma-informed lens?
Like Lamentations. Prayer of
Like,
Manasseh.
right. Like imagine the Psalms, imagine Ecclesiastes, imagine all these different texts that talk about like wrestling with like if life is worth living from a trauma-informed perspective. I think that's a fascinating study. And I don't know of many articles because it's so new. Like I heard that it was a thing that was coming up when I was in seminary, and that wasn't too long ago.
Wow.
So I think that psychohistory is really fascinating. If I'm understanding this correctly, I could be uneducated on this. But reading psychology through history, I think, is valuable. It's also where we get a lot of our historical criticisms, because what we have learned to do is go, oh, the people that need to speak into these issues weren't in the room, so how would they read it? I don't think that's such a fundamentally different process than psychohistory is what I understand it to be. To go, let's read what we now know into these texts. I think that's valuable, especially if these texts are trying to embody the human experience.
That's got to be hard to do, though. You have to, I mean, to be able to juggle psychology, or is it psychiatry or psychology, and the historical method at the same time. I mean, that sounds like it's not for everybody. Like that's
could you imagine like somebody going, I have a psychology degree, I'm just going to read these historical texts, or I have a history degree, I'm just going to read these texts from a psychological perspective. I don't think that can be done well. I think you're exactly right. That's fucking
it can be attempted, though. You know, I think it's worth trying.
Could you imagine, like that excites me. Like imagine being able to look through history and how people experience stuff with a good psychological and historical education, and going, now that we know what we know about how humans live, that's what they were talking about.
Right.
That's actually really beautiful. I think that could be really interesting.
It's kind of like what religion sort of was doing. It was like a replacement for psychiatry.
Yeah, well, like I think there's supernatural. Like, what was the middle ground between like supernaturalism and psychology? It was alienism. It was like this otherness approach, right?
Yeah.
So
You got probed.
I was gonna make a sex joke. I decided not to.
Sorry,
know if
I
it's
made a
gonna be taken
probe
down.
joke. Also, sorry. Yes, this question. Also, Andrew, you should read Pat's comments in the chat. But that's all.
Pat? Yeah. Okay.
Andrew, yes.
I'll bring up Pat's comments and then I'll go back to Kate's question. So, I don't know. Were you able to read all that?
I'm a fucking boomer, so.
YouTube.
Lorena Bobbitt.
Unholy Trinity. I'm doing it, y'all.
What are
I'm
you
so
doing?
fucking old, dude. Like, just
We have 1.4
just
thousand.
roll me into the
subscribers.
retirement home at this point. I'm so fucking old.
Andrew, are you reading the question? Can I...
Nope. What
We're
Paul is
live
talking
right
about in
now.
Galatians is much more complicated than is being presented here. Ritual castration was a serious consideration for many early Christians. Maybe Jesus did it. Or maybe he got laid.
I think he got laid.
Dude, can you imagine being like, this is the only life I get? And that's heaven.
Mm-mm.
Jack off into the abyss. Sorry.
Oh my god.
I'm canceling
Did any of you
myself.
watch The
Goodbye.
Boys?
All I need to say is if Jack Off Into the Abyss is not an album name at this point in time,
A band name.
history has. I just feel like there's a missed opportunity somewhere. That's like a Disturbed cover band if I've ever heard one.
I'm sorry.
That's
I'm the worst.
agreed.
No one should ever talk to me ever again.
So, do any of you watch The Boys?
No.
I've seen the first season. Well, maybe the second. How
I
many
watched a
seasons
little bit
are
of
out?
it.
So we're waiting for the third season, but like the second season literally ends with like Homelander on top of a building, just like jacking off, being like, I can do whatever the fuck I want.
That makes a lot of sense considering his character arc. I'm not surprised by that necessarily.
If that is the peak of your existence, go off, King. You know what I mean?
All right.
Well, he's
So
going
we have
off.
this
There's not even a
question
woman involved.
from Kate says, do you have people working on trauma-informed theology you could refer us to? As someone who works on child abuse and foster care issues, I'm into that. I want to read all the things.
I would love to, it has been less than 5 years since I have heard that it was a new theology criticism being developed. And it was a passing mention in an Old Testament course. If there is stuff fundamentally developed at this point, I don't know about it, but I'd also like to make clear mention it is a new criticism because there is enough developed about trauma-informed ideologies now to look back at historical documents for people that are educated in it. That's a new thing. And I think it's really interesting, right? Like, y'all, we know enough about the human experience to be able to re-examine history. That's big, right? Like, we know enough about what it means to be human to be able to look at historical documents and be like, now we have a new lens to understand pain, to understand loneliness. Like, that's what's happening right now.
Rather not, to be honest.
And so I don't know anything yet, but I know where to look, and if I find anything, I'll be sure to let you know, Kate.
Okay, so do we want to talk about price before we wrap things up? Because like it's like almost
Oh
12:30.
my
Is it
God.
price or
Yeah.
price? Because I'm confused.
Price.
I
Price
guess
is
we
key.
can do the short version. Neil, you're gonna have to help me out here.
Sure.
But soon I want to so Robert Price is a scholar who was largely known in the community because he is a mythicist. So he believed sort of this
It's
idea
true.
that Jesus. Sorry.
He has 2 PhDs and 3 masters, so people took him. I mean, he's not just some random. He's
Please.
Right.
he's a real scholar. But
Right.
Yeah. No.
that
I
should
don't
be
think
known.
he's like
That
a
should be stated
fake
because
scholar. Yeah.
there's a reason why people deal with him or want to listen to him when it comes to ancient religions, which is why I'm
Yeah.
saying.
Please.
That.
No. Please. Like.
But long story short,
any
Derek
context you'd like.
Mythvision was a really good friend of him. He had him on his channel like over 100 times at least. I had him on my channel probably 20 times maybe. And we knew he was conservative. We knew he had a Republican-minded person, but I never, we always try to keep that off.
Yeah.
But
So I think the
this is where
thing
you
was
step
like,
in.
at this time I was
I
becoming.
feel like this is gonna get real racist or real sexist.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
Andrew knows
it's
me
bad.
very well. Andrew knows me very well. And
show.
I managed to somehow become a decently loud voice for holding bigots accountable. I know it's shocking. Can't believe. Couldn't be me. And
It couldn't have
it
to be
happened
all
to
of you.
Right.
what?
What?
Yeah,
What?
exactly. And usually it was people in the Christian community where I'd be like, y'all are fucked up. But then someone sent me a bunch of these screenshots and like links to Robert Price's shit. And so like I was gonna be a whole ass hypocrite if I ignored them. And so I posted a thread that just said like we should probably stop platforming this person because he's a racist bigot. And then I posted all of the evidence.
That was when we said, okay, this shit looks bad. Me and Derek
some
are on the phone
folks
talking. We were looking at
were
this.
like,
This is bad.
Fuck
Why don't
this
we?
pig-haired bitch? No.
Well, then, Doug from Pine Creek was like, "Oh, come on, it's freedom of speech. This, that, and the third. He's still a scholar,
yes.
still a great scholar." And it's
Yes.
like, all right, fine. Let's
Well, Pine
have
Creek
him
was like,
on
I'm
Pine
going to
Creek.
stick it to her, that fucking social
Right.
justice warrior. I'll have
Well,
him
he's
on
like,
the show, and like
well,
I'm
me
going to
and- me and
platform
Derek-
him. And I was like, go off, King.
Well, yeah.
He literally made
and
it
Derek-
worse.
Me and Derek were like, listen, why doesn't he just, go and talk
Just
to Pine
pipe
Creek
down.
and be like, listen, I said some things in the past that I didn't mean
Right.
I didn't mean to make anybody upset. Something along those lines. Do something. Like we're throwing him a softball pitch to make
Just
it better.
like-
He gets on there and makes it worse. Like he
Oh,
makes
yeah.
it 100 times worse.
He did more damage than I could have ever dreamed of doing.
But the
Like,
opening of the whole
what do you
video,
do?
you could tell Pine Creek was wanting it to be.
Oh, dude, Pine
A shit
Creek
show.
said that somebody was running on colored time.
Oh yeah,
And then he said that it was okay because his wife is Caribbean.
They were making Michelle Obama jokes. I mean,
Whoa,
dude,
I need
yeah.
I'm
way
super clipping it
more
right now.
information.
it
was so
was
bad.
obvious at the opening of the show, the questions he was taking from the audience, the comments he was putting across the screen, the stuff that he was laughing at, and the comments that he thought this was going to be
Just
hilarious.
FYI, so Josh and I are super clipping it for Matt Dillahunty.
Oh wow.
So,
Yeah.
all right.
I'm
yeah.
so
So-
sorry. I'm so lost.
So Andrew, so
What?
Pine Creek,
Sorry, don't
Pine
tell me
Creek
when I
had
said that.
Price on to like have him speak
What's a
more
Pine
about.
Creek?
Pine
He
Creek
has a
Doug,
YouTube channel.
Pine Creek is a YouTube channel who had nothing to do with anything but saw controversy and was like,
Yep.
let me get some clicks out
Let me
of
get
that
on
bitch.
that. Yep.
And then,
Got it.
and then he put it on and he tanked Derek, to be
Yep.
honest. I mean, didn't tank Derek, but he like did a lot of damage to Derek that
Well-
didn't need to be done.
I agree.
Like,
Well,
it
but
could
then
have been a
also
much
like
slower,
Price,
like graduated process.
yeah. So Price was saying some of the most vile, and like it wasn't just racist. He also was being like transphobic and being
Very
like
Everything.
misogynistic,
But like,
just like
so the thing,
Name it.
there are like two things that I think like just have like really
How old
I
is
guess
this
it's
man?
three things.
Pine Creek.
So
No, this man.
Dr. Bob, he's like,
Price?
He's
70.
old.
He's like 70 years old.
Yeah.
It's very, yeah.
yeah,
It's a shame.
Robert Price
This
is
man is a
older.
relic.
So at one point he said the blacks need to leave the Democratic plantation.
Yeah,
Wait.
word for word.
He said that
Word
trans
for
kids
word.
are only being trans because it's cool in school, and that they're
Oh yeah, they're
being,
letting them in
they're being
school.
forced into it by their teachers.
Like, have
He
you?
also
And Trayvon Martin.
Oh, a thug.
Yep.
No, he called him Trayvon Martyr.
Yes, that was what his
Uh-huh.
post said.
And
Trayvon
said he was
Martyr.
like another
That was in response to someone else who had died.
I'm-
Another young black man, I believe. And then he
Michael.
yeah. Oh, farts. There's way too many.
Well, that's the problem, right? Is that so many black men have been executed by police that, like, I get their names mixed up, and that's absolute horseshit.
It's yeah.
Well, and so the other thing that he said that
Yeah,
like
Aaron.
was like fucking was that like so he said that rioters should be shot and killed on sight even if they're
yes.
kids because
Yes.
they're
They're
always
15 or
be on the
younger.
wrong side of things.
And then he was
Yet,
asked, what about the January 6th people?
insurrectionists-
And he
He
said,
was like,
no, they're doing the right
insurrection
thing.
was actually done by Antifa, yet at the same time, all of the people there were innocent.
Yeah. Here's the thing.
You know, like
I absolutely think that Pine Creek and Price should be interacted with off camera by white men that they respect. 100% think this should happen. However, I do not think that they should be given a platform to spew their ideals and have them treated as equal opinions. They're not, because your fucking opinion is harmful to people that are already marginalized. That's the thing, right? It doesn't mean that you should then never talk to them again. I think that people that they'll listen to should absolutely engage with them in private. But like this thing where it's like, yeah, come on and we'll debate the validity of someone's existence. No, you can eat shit. Like that's how I feel about that. Sorry. Yeah.
No, that's why I made a statement right away. Is that this is just I can't have him on my channel anymore. Even though I've never had him on for politics, it's always been about his scholarship in biblical studies. It's always been just that, purely that.
Yep.
I don't care anymore. Now that was to me, it was just so I couldn't even watch the whole thing. It was so
it was
bad.
Egregious.
And I literally had like 35 Patreon members. I lost 6 that day because they were Bob Price fans. They were watching me for him. Lost some. Don't care. Gained 8 after that.
Nice.
So,
I genuinely thought that
like
Neil was never going to talk to me.
It balanced itself out. I was like, all right, cool. That's good. There's good people out there, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I honestly, like, if I could do it again, I would have done it a bit more gracefully. You know, it was a bit.
Yeah, it happened the way it should have happened.
Rough.
That's what happens when.
Yeah. But like,
you know,
the reality of the situation is like, he is incredibly harmful. And I hope that people, whoever he ultimately engages with, are willing to talk to him and try to give him an alternate perspective. But the thing is like those of us, I mean, I don't even have that big of a platform on YouTube, but folks that do, it's like there has to be consequences for being a damaging human being. Like,
in fact, the fact that you mentioned that, I forgot about this part because in between the time period of you dropping that tweet and him going on Pine Creek, I actually had him on my channel.
Right.
In between those, I had him on the next day.
I recall.
And I told him this. I was telling him, you know, I told him the story of when I was in prison. When I saw a innocent black kid get his ass beat just for talking back. I told him another story about a friend of mine who I was in high school with who came out as gay and then no one talked to him ever again. I'm just I wasn't trying to be confrontational to him, but I was just trying to tell him.
To get a response, like see where he stands.
I was just trying to, like, you know, talk to him. This is the only time I've ever talked politically with Dr. Price, ever, was that time. Then the Pine Creek thing happened. Then I said, you know what? I'm out of here. I'm not even going to try to. He's obviously way too far gone for me. Way too far gone. So, it's what it is. No.
It's
I mean, okay, so this weekend,
it was a fire.
Yeah, this weekend I had I was at the atheist convention and there was this 72-year-old man at the bar who had a lot to drink, and he was talking about how much he loves Ron DeSantis. And as a queer person, it's like very triggering for me. But I also had not eaten in over 24 hours. So like I responded in a way that was like more aggressive than I intended to. And so I like apologized, being like, hey, you know, I haven't eaten in over 24 hours. I didn't mean to come off that way. I'm very tired and very hungry. And he was like, oh, well, from the look of you, I would think you never stopped eating.
What?
Yeah.
When did that happen?
It happened on Saturday.
Excuse me, why didn't you tell me so I could?
I thought I did. I was like,
no, you did not.
I thought I did.
No.
What'd you say to that?
Oh, I didn't say anything. I just like was like, and I am done with this conversation. Not going any further. It's like
that man clearly knows nothing about eating anything. You know what I mean? God, I would have been like,
that's awful. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. So it's like, yeah, no, I definitely get it. There's like certain people. My dad, and that was the other part that like just blew my fucking mind, is that like not only is Price like, you know, a very respected scholar, but he is like one of the like go-to mythicists that like that
there's only a few, to be honest.
Yeah, but like so he was like one of the like go-to, and so the fact that he firmly believes that Jesus never existed because there isn't enough evidence, and yet fully believes that Biden stole the election and the evidence exists, we just don't have access to it.
He wasn't making any sense. He wasn't making any sense. He was acting like a god. He was acting like a god in his stance, like with how he believes stuff.
I genuinely think this is a thing that like we should all address eventually. When people get an academic education, it does not require an unpacking of their racism, their sexism, their childhood trauma, or their political ideologies.
It's much like deconstructing from religion, right? You can deconstruct from Christianity and you can still hold on to all of your racism, misogyny, transphobia, homophobia, like all of that bullshit. You can still be equally as bigoted as an atheist as you are as an evangelical.
And like,
and I'll still drag your ass.
They get from it what they want. They use their bias to be like, oh, that makes sense. That backs me up.
And I just want to mention this because I've seen it used this way, and I want to make it clear that I'm not trying to do this. Like, I have heard Christians talk about like sexism in atheist communities as like proof that they're not that great either. That's not what I'm doing here. That's not my attempt. I'm just like, I know it's weird. I also think it's weird. I'm not doing that. We need to be so clear that like when people get an academic education, it is training in one small aspect of life. And sometimes it's amazing and it affects other spaces. Like that's my experience. Like it affected other spaces in my life. And that's how I ended up the way I did. Like an academic education, like fucking changed me for the better. But that's not the case across the board.
Right.
Listen, Josh, dogs don't come from non-dogs. That's all I'm saying. I'm reading the chat.
I don't know what that means, but
they don't come from fucking non-dogs.
Still going?
Dogs don't come from non-dogs.
Is this the Ken Hovind voice that we should be reading this in?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
These group of atheists are still going.
They're so evil.
Ken Hovind here.
Indentured servitude was more like an employee debt repayment because Canaanites were evil.
Good job.
Anyway,
I didn't know how to read that in all caps with a question mark at the end. I don't think I nailed it, but B+.
Have you seen not Kent Hovind on
TikTok?
Oh,
on TikTok.
Have to look it up. Wow.
Yeah.
But have you also
Strong opinions about slavery, if I remember correctly.
Sorry?
Strong opinions about slavery, not Kent Hovind.
So, have you heard of... Yeah, that's because it's Dr. Josh.
Yeah.
That's why.
So
yeah.
have
Do you know who
heard
Kent Hovind
speak?
is?
I'm under the impression that I'm better off not knowing.
No, you should know who Kent Hovind is
Oh.
because hot mess.
In some ways,
No,
he's
I
right.
heard
but-
the ugh.
In some ways, he's
Did
right.
you hear the ugh? I heard the ugh.
Yeah.
I don't
Kent
think I need to
Hovind
know.
is like a terrible Christian apologist who has like
Mm.
Dinosaur Adventureland and is also
no-
just like a
Pretext.
massive
The
fraud.
arc is real. We have
Yeah,
evidence.
He's
Neil,
the
did
worst.
you hear the redundancy there?
Yeah,
Terrible
he's the
Christian
worst.
apologist?
But
Like,
then
I
you get
heard
to
it.
see
Trying to
the
acknowledge that.
what's the word I'm looking for? You get to see the parody that's then done by Josh, who you know.
And
I
yeah,
am
and
not
like
so
he-
interested in parody that I will consume poison.
Well, you're the worst.
you don't have
Kent
to like
Hovind's
just been
CPA
watching
on
him.
YouTube.
But like part of it is like some of the things that like Kent Hovind has said too, because like there was one point in a debate where he didn't have an argument, so instead he said something along the lines of, "You're probably thinking about whale penises right now
Yeah, that's what he said.
because you're an atheist and you don't have no morals." And like,
Like, who is thinking about
How
that?
did
Nobody.
you know?
No, I think about whale penises often because did you know that the majority of sea monster drawings that we have are most likely depictions of whale penises? This is a real thing. Like,
I've
if
heard that
you
before.
look at a whale penis versus like images of the Loch Ness monster, borderline identical. I think about this not every day,
You should go to
but
therapy for that,
multiple
to be
times
honest.
Not
a
every
week.
day.
Because, like, can you imagine that a phallus created mythology? That's fantastic. I think that's worth noting.
have you made a TikTok about that yet?
I haven't.
Yeah, you should,
You
definitely
should
But
do
do
I
that.
it.
think that was
It'll.
like- Everyone
name?
Google image whale penis.
No,
sea
James
monster.
Frazier.
absolutely
Already done.
fucking
Are you
not. I'm
familiar
not
with
going to do
James
that.
Frazier? The
Already in my head.
Yeah, no, I won't be
What is
googling
he,
that.
And
He's a
then
writer from, like,
the
the
other
1960s.
one
That's
is
Dixter.
It
What
is
do-
specifically orcas usually.
Please, what is
clear-
happening? Loch Ness
The other one-
Dixter. Goodbye. Neil, what were you saying? James
Oh,
Frazier?
no, James Frazier
Loch
said
Ness
that
monster
the
cock.
the golden phallus of Osiris was corn growing every year. Was Osiris having an erection?
I appreciate that.
My kind of guy.
Did you know that Ramses ejaculated into the Nile to make it fertile?
Oh,
That's a thing.
Wow, I didn't know that.
who doesn't? I mean, honestly.
Like, so what I think is interesting about that ritual is that he then watched his selected group of men ejaculate. Like, that was part of the ritual, is
Oh.
watching other men masturbate into the Nile and requiring others to do it.
Is
Forced,
that why it's
forced voyeurism
saltwater?
as a magical
Circle jerk.
ritual.
Wow.
I don't know what book that's in,
This
but
has
it
gone
needs
off
to be
the
in
rails.
one.
Sorry.
No, because like the other one that I hear all the time was whack an atheist. So did like Kent Hovind say
Oh yeah,
that
Kent
at some
Hovind
point?
did do whack an atheist, where he's like trying to
What?
like
Yeah,
when I
that's
say
serious.
whack a bigot on Twitter, like that was his idea, except for he fucking sucks. So he
Oh my god.
So
Yeah,
like
do it.
that's the thing now is whack an atheist
Whack an
Wednesday
atheist.
is like we'll make like jokes.
In all fairness to Kent Hovind, whale penis is a surprising
You
phenomenon.
don't even know who Kent Hovind is.
Do you
Please
like this whale penis?
I
You were on
exclusively
this.
am defending
don't
his
play
point
with me,
because
dog. Yeah.
if you're
All right,
watching
so-
a placid
This,
lake
sir.
I
and
feel
out
like
of
I'm
nowhere
not-
this
no.
large pink apparatus comes
Please
forth.
don't ask me about the Argentinian blue-billed duck. I won't.
I need
Whatever the
it
fuck
needs
that
to-
means.
Is it a
I'm gonna
corkscrew
Google this right
penis?
now, because none
I
of
don't
you
know
will
that.
Google what I just said. I'm
I'm
going to
like
Google
sleep-
what you just said.
Well, that sounds
Argentinian.
like a bad idea, to be honest.
Okay, so
You should Google. Never mind.
Blue.
Yeah,
No.
Jesus.
Google. That's nice.
Blue waffle.
Praise
It's
him.
lovely. It's
I
a
was going to
lovely
say blue
duck.
waffle.
Why am I
She grows
11
up.
years old? Please.
I don't understand why I would have a. What the fuck is wrong with this duck?
What the fuck is wrong with this duck?
Yeah, the corkscrew.
There's a lot
fucking
happening.
sick.
Whoa.
so I feel like at this
Don't
point,
try to bring it back on track.
yeah, I was
That's
like, I
just
almost
surreal.
feel like it's like
Legally
we've been going
dick.
for over 3 hours, and it is even an hour later that
Yeah, I
where
gotta
Andrew is,
I'm
and so before we wrap things up, why don't we have everyone plug all your socials?
I don't
Wrap your
understand
socials.
the evolutionary benefit of the squiggly dick of the Argentinian blue-billed duck. This is I don't understand why this would be
How did this
beneficial.
go from Paul to the Argentinian bluebill duck dick? Like, how did this happen?
You know, it's a lot.
Why doesn't it?
Why
Right,
does it
right, right.
protrude as frequently as it does? Like,
Someone I gotta go. Just too much.
it's a bird, so it has to retract, right? Unless there's something else going
Who
on
said
here.
Soren said Tang tonight? Who was on Tang, bro? We're all old as hell. Maybe Neil. I don't know.
Tang?
He never sleeps.
Oh, you talking about the show Tang with Oz?
I don't know. He said Tang tonight, so I guess that's the only one I can think of.
Tang.
Yeah, Oz usually does like late night shows.
Yeah.
Don't tempt me with a good time.
But alrighty, so
The Argentinian blue-billed duck vagina also protrudes.
Dude is on the dick.
Fully, like, to a certain extent, fully
On that
outside the body. And this is fascinating. Like, no, let's say this for a moment.
Dicks are fascinating.
No. Also,
I know why.
Argentinian blue-billed duck vagina. Let's be
Oh.
equal rights here. It
Yeah.
also protrudes. I didn't know that.
Oh, I would not have known.
Like a
Mine
pitcher
protrudes
plant,
a little
just like comes out
That's mine too.
doing
Like
some
what?
dick eating. And from what
What
I
a
can
crazy
tell,
space right now.
this is fascinating.
Is
Oh,
it like,
please.
is it like Teeth? That movie Teeth, where
Oh
No,
my
more
God.
like have you ever
This
seen
feels
like
illegal. I
the additional
feel like, what is
suction
happening?
attachment added
Neil, why
to
don't
like the
you,
hose of a
go
vacuum
first?
cleaner?
Correa trying to bring it back to
Like
sanity.
like a it's got a wide girth for the reception of the Argentinian.
No, I'm
penis.
done here. Oh, someone said Red Sage is his crush or their crush.
Oh, nice.
I can see that now. I can totally see it. Andrew's
Yeah.
amazing. I can totally
I'm,
get it.
I'm here as myself.
That's
Yes.
I mean,
And
That's a
that's-
lot
to
of
be here,
vagina,
to
is
be
what I'm
H.
seeing
Don't
right
spam
here.
the chat with
This
your Red
is
Sage
The
love.
vagina.
surprising.
There's a lot going on right now. I'm just
The explosive sex life of the Argentinian blue-billed duck. I'm
I'm-
watching this documentary.
well, you should,
Share your
but do that
screen.
off camera so you can have your feels. You know what I mean?
This is just
Joshua,
I didn't
what
even know this was an
are you
option.
doing here?
This is exactly what we expect from atheists.
Duh.
When
Well,
you can ground your morality in the ultimate
Someone
necessary
please-
preconditions.
I've had enough of my life for this evening. Wait, he wants to write you a poem. Someone kill me.
It's not specifically whale penis across the board, but orcas in particular seem to have a fascinating part of human history. I didn't decide that. So the next time you watch like all these like Pirates of the Caribbean movies, I need you to know the story of the Kraken came from whale dick.
It's a fact.
Prove
oh.
it.
That's a whole ass thing.
Mm.
It changes the
must
way
be
you
a-
feel about those men being grabbed up and taken underwater. It's like that's a
It
dick
doesn't
right
change
there.
how I feel about it.
That's so
R.I.P.,
keen
bitch.
taking away that
I mean-
unhygienic man.
Ooh, my goodness gracious. me
Apparently,
alive.
ducks don't respect consent. I don't know where this night
No,
was on.
ducks are horrible. They are
I'm
terrible.
under the impression like
They-
if
they
the most
grate.
rapey animal on the planet is the
They
otter.
grate. Oh,
That's a
I thought it was
terrifying
the
creature.
dolphin.
He's
No,
happy.
otters will
Dolphins,
like
no way.
if you want
I
to
think
ruin every
penguins.
show
I've
with
heard
an otter in
penguins
it, look up
too.
type otter rape into your Google search bar and let all joy leave your body. Like everything good leaves, everything bad happens.
Venomous.
Like it's
Let all the joy leave your body. Yes, that sounds appealing.
Like, I'm not saying that you should
I love depression.
pursue understanding the rapey tendencies of otters, but holy shit, those rodents are terrifying. And you need to know about that. We're committed to truth here.
Right.
What is this? Like America's Most Wanted?
Like just terrifying little adorable creatures.
Like, I know that we talk about Bible a lot, but I have a like, my brain hits record when other things happen. And now you know that.
Oh my gosh.
Well, this was an exciting episode.
I wonder if there's any animals that do have consent.
To like whale dicks. I don't even know what to do anymore.
So,
so much for respectability. You know what I mean?
we can have a fun conversation about like the sentience of life forms, because like octopus technically have consent,
Really?
but like sex would end in death usually.
Oh, okay.
So like, what's
That's
going on there?
Terrible.
Because
It's so good. It's just so good that you
Like,
can die.
sex
it? Not
punching
crickets.
happens, and like internal
Grasshoppers.
damage takes place.
Where the female like rips the head off of the male.
Yeah, let's just talk about all kinds of crazy wild animal
Sex
sex.
You know what I mean? What can you do?
That's
What's
how
that
we're
blood?
going up
What's
this
that
week. We're gonna
Bloodhound
go down
Gang
to it.
song? You and
Oh, yeah,
me,
yeah,
baby,
You
ain't
talk about, like-
nothing but mammals. So let's
That was
do
my
it
jam.
like they do on the Discovery
And then
Channel.
Eminem like remixed it.
We can
Like
talk about
one
cats
verse,
with
like one
penises
split second of a verse.
and dog fist dick.
Someone said, "I'm sorry that this is my first interaction with the channel. So am I."
Oh no, Jackal Twist.
I need you to know
So am I.
this is
Sorry.
entirely my fault, and I'm not sorry.
No,
Red
I'm
Sage,
so
look into
I'm
snail
friends with
sex.
Jackal
Don't do that.
Twinkie, and like that's him saying I'm sorry this is my first time because like he wants
Because I wish I was here before. Yeah, you can move in.
I will
My
talk
kind of-
about whale dick
my
again.
kind of person.
Arson Chaos
I
says to look into snail sex.
No, don't
Is
do
it
it.
slimier than
Googling
usual?
this
Why are you
immediately.
suggesting this at this time of the night?
Never
Are
know.
there secretions involved? I'm thinking.
I'm thinking something.
my
Yes.
Google image snail sex. Holy shit! Wow,
I don't
that's
know.
fascinating.
Dog, how did we get here?
Why does
Yo,
it
I-
come out the side of their face?
because of
I
Kent
gotta tell
Hovind.
you.
We can
I
blame
gotta tell
Kent
you.
Hovind
What?
for everything.
We have a fish
All
tank
kinds-
and we
it's
have
all
like the
kinds of
underwater turbo snails,
That's
and they
fascinating.
all just like
They
jizzed
have
in the
glowing
water.
genitalia.
Why
That's
is
all I
it
saw in the chat.
blue?
I'm ill.
It's
I'm
blue.
you're welcome, Neil, that we invited you on for this. You're so
Look at that.
welcome.
Appreciate
Wow.
it. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you know, I did not
Thank you,
know
sir.
that it was going to go this way.
Thank
Having
I thought we were
time.
God.
just going to talk about
Hey, it's
Paul.
420, by the way.
Hey,
Yeah, just blaze.
Yo.
This is a good way to kick off 420. It's talking about animal sex.
What?
I really don't understand,
Yeah.
like, anatomically speaking, how can a dick come out of the side of a snail's face?
I don't
You
know.
clearly don't
I
understand.
mean, a tongue is
creation.
kind of like a dick. I mean, a tongue could be used as
If you
like a
use
dick.
it right.
Hey,
Yes.
I mean, that's what I'm saying.
You gotta get an anatomy expert on for this type of stuff
Hey,
right
get
here.
Kent Hovind on, please.
Oh, wow.
Without JeGaysus, we are depraved.
Ken
That's
Hovind
true.
is an expy in all fields. Everything.
Dude,
Yeah, you
Ken
name it.
Hovind, the only thing
He
Ken
has an
Hovind
answer.
is an expert in is tacky shirts, to be honest.
And
I
taxes.
want his shirts.
Paying-
I
how
wish
to
I
pay
could
taxes.
find
And
his
avoiding
That's
taxes,
why,
yeah.
Yeah.
You're the middleman and just Google snail dick. Let's see what happens.
I'm sure you're getting some interesting shit over there.
That's a surprising amount of not
Not
legitimate. There's a lot of cartoons here that I did not expect.
You watching anime over there?
cartoon snail.
There's some
A lot
hentai
of your
here
search
that
probably
I
based
didn't
off
even
other shit, yeah.
anticipate.
What's
I-
your search history?
I feel naive. I feel legitimately naive.
Without Red Sage noticing me, I am Nida?
What's
I
that?
don't know what that means. I'm a boomer.
Nida.
Hmm.
I mean,
How can two dicks become one?
Fucking
Nada?
God.
Maybe he meant to say nada. No.
it's the apotheosis.
That's the quote for the entire night.
That's impressive.
How
Like,
can
How can two dicks become one? God is a bit of a freak.
This
Why-
isn't
why
like a
can't
like
it
a
be?
mollusk docking scenario. That's not what I'm suggesting.
Sir, what the fuck?
Docking is
I'm gonna
when
go to
two,
sleep. This
like,
is
it requires one. Do you want a legitimate answer or?
Why Levitical law?
Well, I guess we're just are we going back to something serious.
I've been serious this entire time.
Y'all, why are you still in the chat? We're a hot ass fucking mess.
There's still like 20-something people.
Why
watching.
are they so obsessed? Why
They're
are men?
always
Because the Old
blue.
Testament
Why is
hates
snail
women.
dick always blue.
Is it?
What?
Like based on my 15 seconds of research, snail
You're more
dick
of an
is
expert than me.
consistently blue, and not always coming from the
Blue
same
balls.
space. Like from like different parts of
Different
your
parts of
body,
your body.
like a perverted Voltron fusing together for the sake of like
This
making.
has to be the weirdest
making a
chat I've been
phallus.
in so long, and that's saying a lot.
I don't understand this.
Two
You know
dicks.
what? Because I was
Two dicks,
recently on a
one cup.
podcast where they discussed like a fucking like electrical rod that you like people
What?
with. And
Ooh.
this is the weirdest chat I've been in. Yeah.
I need to stop. I need
Yep.
to stop. I can't do this anymore to myself. I need more time with Will with like snail dick to understand what's happening. I'm very confused.
Should just have a whole
Need more
episode.
time with
I-
snail dick.
I can't do it anymore. There's too much to know.
This has
I
been
just can't do it.
super
anymore.
duper real.
As he like dramatically falls onto a.
I'm back, y'all. I'm not Googling anything anymore.
I wonder how many scholarly
Well, then
papers
in that
there are.
case,
I gotta make it to more live streams. Yeah, anything can happen.
Ryan, tell us where we can find you on the socials.
Oh, well, Ryan Cultastic here on the tubes. Tax the Churches on TikTok. And I think I am also Tax the Churches on Twitter or Annette_Yahoo. Either one.
Isn't there a type of slug that penis fights another slug to determine which one becomes the girl slug?
Ooh, I'm here for it.
I don't
wanna-
know.
Can I pull
No,
up my
that's
penis and
sick.
fight to become a girl slug? I'm down. That's my kind of fight.
There are clams that do that.
My
that
clam
have,
does
like-
it.
So that's the thing.
Oof, you know?
I didn't ask for this life. I'm just a part of it.
Yeah, I just showed up on the stream to talk about Paul.
Paul killed John the Baptist.
So Ryan, are you also on? Do you also have like a YouTube show or something?
Oh, yes. I have a show called Pious Placebo on the Biddy Buddha channel, and our good old friend Pat is on that channel too, the Biddy Buddha channel. That's that with
Pat.
Biddy and Pat.
And I'm supposed to be on
Yes.
there at some point.
I was gonna ask
Yes,
you that,
when
'cause I saw you on
they-
Biddy. I saw you on
it's
Biddy
the old-
Buddha, and I didn't know if that was
Yeah.
your channel or not. I was like, "Are you Biddy Buddha? Which one's Biddy Buddha?"
Oh,
So
me?
Biddy Buddha is out.
Oh,
Or-
no.
yeah.
No, I am not Biddy Buddha. I am Ryan, but
I think
yes,
I
am
figured
on-
it out now, but
Yeah,
that was
I'm
this is
sorry.
Before. This is
Sorry.
before when I was like watching
Yeah,
that
yeah.
channel. I didn't know which one was which, but I got that though.
Thank
It's a
you.
Good channel
Sorry.
too. Good channel.
Thank you. Thank you.
Pat's awesome
How
too.
dare
I
you
gotta
say
get.
Pat-
I want to get a hold of Pat. And have him on my channel sometime.
You really should.
Pat is awesome.
His classes are amazing. He actually, I'm in his class right now, and it's really, really good. So
Nice.
you should do.
Now,
All right,
I
so then
realize
Neil-
that the Queen of Heathens is like the go-to like YouTube guest, but I am also available for YouTube guesting.
I'm
If
gonna
you want to
get
hear more about
I'm
I
gonna
am
get you on my
also
channel next week
available.
then.
If you
I'm
want to
more
hear
available.
more
Cool.
about snail penis.
I'm more available. Yes, I will talk about any penis. So I'm just kidding.
I will shit talk literally any of them.
I'm
No,
really giving people a bad impression of myself, I
Or-
think.
Okay.
I'm gonna pass
No.
it by.
I don't actually know how long I talked about dick today.
A long time, buddy.
Dude,
Uh,
Jackal too. What the fuck?
dude. Anyway, you should go on Neil's channel sometime if he'll
What?
have you. Probably not
Definitely.
to discuss snail penises, but
Ouch.
Neil was an excellent host.
It can be it can be non-mollusk like phallic imagery.
Yeah, I should hope that it is, to
But
be
I think
honest.
we should have at least a little segment on it, though. Just
We can be like, and Andrew, here's some
just
facts
have me on
about
for
that.
5 minutes to like join in this discussion.
yeah.
No, I feel like a more interesting discussion, at least if we're going to be academic, would be for you to talk about, because I know that's a discussion you want to have on the show, is biblical porn.
Yes, ancient Near Eastern erotica. It's like a whole fucking thing.
Also, we should have Neil on our show.
Have you read Francesca Stavrakopoulos' book?
Yes.
Yes, I love her.
I do too. Yeah, I love it. It's so
I am
good. It's so
in the
good.
works with someone in the UK getting me a copy of her UK version because
I know, I
fucking
wanted
hate
the
that red cover.
I wanted the
This
blue
shit right
one
here?
too. Yes.
That bitch right
This
there.
is the book of the year right here.
It's so
That's a
good.
shit cover though.
No, there's another
Yeah,
cover.
the other one is
Dude,
better.
There's a
British
blue
cover is-
cover.
Footsteps
And
one is
I don't know why I got
gorgeous.
this one. I wish I had the other one. I'm not gonna lie.
Also,
Me too.
Neil, there may or may not be a way. You haven't had her on, have you?
Not yet, but there is. We are doing
Hit me up.
next month actually.
Yeah,
Derek hooked it up.
She's like so bae.
I know.
She's
like
probably
my-
she's probably doing
amazing.
interviews every day.
She's
Probably.
amazing.
No. Anyway, enough about this. You know what I mean? This has been
Oh, so
Yeah.
truly
That's the good
something.
one. That's the good
Yeah.
one.
Andrew,
Yeah, I have someone in the UK, and I'm like, let me know as soon as you can get it, and I will pay for all
This
because
is
it's
what the UK
an
does.
aesthetic
love
to
that
me. I
cover
just can't.
so much.
Bob. Oh, oh yeah. Anyway, that's a
okay, so
topic for
then
after the
Neil,
show.
why don't you? Where can we find you?
Yes, where can we find
YouTube.com/gnostic-informant, and that's basically it. And then there's my Twitter, but not a lot of shit going on over there. You can see my @ right underneath my face at Neil Selnack1.
Oh, that's your Twitter handle?
Wait, someone wants to
Yeah.
hold on.
Okay, I'll follow
Nadimo
you.
says, anyone got an in for Neil for me? Neil, have to chat. I don't have an in. I don't have an in, but you can look.
He needs an in. He wants
What's
to
that?
talk.
I
Think
don't know.
what's
Oh, email?
I think he wants to chat, yo.
Yeah, there's a public email on
Yeah,
my
and-
YouTube in the about.
Ken,
And
three
Neil,
times.
legitimately,
if
if you ever wanna
Red
have a fun
Sage on the
conversation,
show,
Neil, if you ever want to have a fun conversation, I'd love to be on your show.
I'm down. Yeah, I'm down. I'm definitely gonna reach out soon, and we'll set it up like next week.
Neil, if you ever want to have just like a weird conversation, you can come on our show. I can only guarantee that. That's
All
it.
right, all right. I'm down.
But
And also, if
as
like
you've seen from
the
this evening,
Cultastics would be interested, I'm curious.
yeah.
So, and I'm interested. So, hit me up.
Sounds good.
is there a Discord for this wonderful place? Yeah, it's in the lowest pit of hell.
Even
You can
Dante
find
wrote
me
about it.
there, the 10th
Right?
circle. I feel like I have a Discord. Maybe like individually we have Discords. We don't have one together.
yeah, no, I'm working on making one.
I'm a boomer. Thank you.
I'm gonna be so bad at it.
Me too.
Okay.
Hello, welcome to me. I'm 85 years old.
Have we finished addressing everything serious? Because like I need to go back to this duck. Because I did some like length conversions and like how in the world does this duck have a 16.5-inch dick?
This is beyond.
16
We
and
were
a
trying to
half
talk about
inches
Paul.
of avian squiggle dick. Because it squiggles the whole way.
Squiggles the whole way.
It squiggles.
No way.
It squiggles. Why?
Put a pen on it and just see if it can.
This is
it writes.
interesting.
Like
Before this, I was taking a Hebrew lesson, and now I'm talking about duck squiggle dicks.
I wanted to ask about that. Like what like Hebrew book are you going through right now?
I don't know. Josh is teaching me.
I use Rosetta Stone, and but you need to know the alphabet before you go to Rosetta Stone. So what I did, I just printed out an alphabet with the English transliteration next to it, and just studied that. Start writing my name. Start writing your name down. Start writing random words down.
For
Once you get
what
the
it's
alphabet-
worth to
Yeah,
everyone.
once you get the alphabet, you just go to Rosetta Stone.
All right, Andrew.
No, I got books. I'm just looking. No, go ahead.
For what it's worth, Josh is going to offer a 6 or 8 week class.
I'm
for
down
anyone
because
that
I'm.
wants to take it.
When is he doing that?
I don't think they have a date yet. I'm sort of like the guinea pig for the sort of like curriculum. But
I'm down. I'll be the first one to sign up and pay for it.
yeah,
I
it
really
should
want to.
be
I've been trying to learn Hebrew for like a
Andrew.
year now. I started about a year
You-
ago. I'm actually not that bad. I'm actually not that bad. I can actually speak a little bit of it.
I
That's
believe
awesome.
that. Yeah. I've been sort of like leaning on him for the general class because I think a lot of people want it.
I did get one book actually. I forgot what it's called. Let me see if I can find it real quick.
I have a Hebrew
Paul
book
was
around here.
abducted.
I really enjoyed Zondervan's.
He was squiggly.
I got this.
Squiggle Dick.
Squiggle dick.
And I didn't realize till like I started learning modern Hebrew how different it is from biblical Hebrew.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's so different.
I have no
Well,
idea how to biblical Hebrew. I haven't even touched it yet, but I'm getting involved in like the Rosetta Stone app, like the modern
Yeah.
Hebrew stuff. You know what I mean?
I know he's going to be doing it. I asked him earlier today. I just don't know exactly when, but I know it's going to be affordable. I think the max amount they'd be charging is like $200 for 6 to 8 weeks, which is nothing.
Sweet.
I trust
yeah.
that he's going to price it the way it should
dude.
be, and I'm down. I'll sign up.
Yeah.
Oh,
I just don't know when it's going to
Ooh,
start.
what do you got there?
Sorry.
Patrico is the book that I went through for biblical Hebrew.
Is
And
it
it looks like this.
basics? Okay, that might be good for me.
I'll look up the book that they sent me, and I'll send you guys the
So
cover. I just don't remember.
Someone that
off the
already
top of my
knows numbers, colors, basic hello, goodbye, all that stuff. Would that be a good startup book for someone like that?
So like this book goes, what is the most common word in the Hebrew Bible? Learn those first. After you learn these 10 words, what percentage of the Hebrew Bible do you know? Because you know these 10 words.
Wow.
And it makes you go, oh yay, now I know this much, you know?
Like every page you see certain words that just pop out to you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so like I like that because I think about language the way I think about math, and so that helps me. That's not for everybody, but if you have like a legitimate tutor, like what Josh is doing, then that'd be 1,000 times better. But
I'm going to Israel in October. If he starts that like between then and October, between now and October, that would be amazing.
I'm sure that he will, but I'll let you know.
Because I really want to get some a good decent knowledge of it before I go there. But
that's awesome.
If not, I'll be okay.
What's gonna be fucked up about Hebrew is you have to read it in a zigzag.
Yeah.
Because like the vowels are below and above, and so you can't read it on a line.
That's true. The nikud, yeah.
You gotta go.
Yeah, I actually started doing it without the
now.
nikud. I feel like I'm better without the nikud. I think I just imply it. Like it's just they probably don't even know what we're talking about. But the nikud is how you pronounce the vowel. So Hebrew has no vowels. If it would go resh to daled, rd would be rud. But there's a nikud. If you look at the nikud, it could be rod or road or rud, depending on what the nikud tells you how to pronounce it.
Yeah, but it leans A or U. It doesn't lean towards I or E.
Right. Yeah.
And that's
I'm
neat.
leaning towards dinner in my bed. So it's been super duper real. Love y'all so
Thanks
much.
for inviting me, guys.
Thank you.
Please, anytime.
you.
I'm sorry this has been such a hot ass mess.
Can we acknowledge that this started off with like the plan of a legitimate debate 3.5 hours ago?
Yeah.
Like that's how this started.
It came right at the end of that too.
I'm sorry I missed the beginning. I will definitely watch though and hear what
We
y'all
tried.
were saying.
You know what I mean? We tried, but this is who we are.
We pretended to be serious for so long.
I bet it was
I'm not
epic.
serious ever. Anyway, bye. No. You all can find me at Queen of the Heathens literally everywhere. So thank you so much for coming to my Theodore chat. Love y'all. Neil, come on our show soon. Ryan, come on our show soon.
Thank you. I'd love to. Thank you.
And try not to think too hard about like the shit we just talked about.
Squiggle dick?
Squiggle dick.
I hate it so much.
Andrew, just really quickly, can we address Ken's question here?
Yeah, I see progressive Christians saying eunuchs also refers to homosexuals. In a word, no. But what I will say is that there is an acknowledgement of something that fits outside of the sexual norm. That is interesting. So, like, the sexual norm does not address eunuchs as a legitimacy in the same way as, like, people who, especially within, like, the Jewish worldview at the time. Well, I shouldn't say Jewish. The Second Temple Israelite worldview at the time does not acknowledge eunuchs in the same way as other people groups, especially in the Roman world. So when we find eunuchs addressed, we find people that seem to step outside of the Torah as requiring a circumcised penis, for example, as being a part of the people of the Abrahamic covenant. Now, we see hints of this theologically speaking within, outside of Deuteronomy. I think it's Deuteronomy. It's in the 30s. I apologize. I don't remember the chapter. But eunuch kind of becomes this like default position of a someone who fits outside the sexual norm. Now, there is this language from Jesus, or at least put into the mouth of Jesus in the Gospels, that says eunuch from birth. That's interesting. There are suggestions that that's idiomatic in Greek to say someone who would have never been interested in a woman who is a male. Debate there. What I think there is legitimate theological evidence of by saying that eunuchs are tied to homosexuals is it is this community, whether eunuch by birth or eunuch being made a eunuch, that fits outside the sexual norm, that is fundamentally accepted within the world of Christianity. That is something that exists as a polemic in the book of Acts. Here's how it works. Philip and the Ethiopian eunuch, which sounds like the most perverted, like Aesop's fable ever. We have this dude writing up, reading the Torah, and then says, is there anything preventing me from entering into heaven? That's fascinating narrative tool. Definitely didn't happen. It's the equivalent of a man walking up with 2 rifles, reading the Constitution, and saying, can I bear arms? Like, it ain't subtle. It's someone who is dealing with a specific text in reference to their own person as a narrative device. Okay? Am I making that clear? Does that make sense to everybody else?
Yeah.
Cool. So this person rides up, sees Philip, says, is there anything preventing me from entering the kingdom of heaven? Specifically, he's talking about baptism in this case. And Philip says, no. He doesn't say maybe. He says no. That's interesting because in Deuteronomy, it says if anyone has their genitals removed, they cannot enter the kingdom of God. Okay? Specifically, if they have their genitals crushed. That's the language that we find in Deuteronomy. And there is language later suggesting that a new pillar will be given. And that's a later text suggesting that a way will be made by God for those that have had, for whatever reason, their genitals removed. So it is, in both cases, it's an acknowledgement of the eunuch in those, Israelite literatures.
Wow.
And then the book of Acts is dealing with that as well. So in the book of Acts, we find, he says, is there anything preventing me? And Philip does not say, well, it depends on who you read. He says, no, there is nothing preventing you. That is suggesting that there is something fundamentally different about the baptism of repentance through Jesus that is being suggested in the book of Acts. Now, I'm not suggesting that we need to adhere to that. I'm suggesting that's what they're trying to suggest. They're trying to put some kind of power in the baptism of repentance in the name of Jesus that is different than this controversy that we're finding within the Torah. This controversy that we're finding within the Tanakh. And so Dude Bro gets baptized and then immediately ascends into heaven. That's how quickly this happens. That's a fascinating story.
It is.
Especially considering in Deuteronomy it says those that have their genitals crushed cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. And then we find the story in Acts, someone gets baptized who has had their genitals crushed and immediately enters the kingdom of heaven. It is a direct pushback theologically against this other text. Now, the way that benefits the LGBTQ plus community is it's suggesting there is these non-sexual norms that are fully affirmed intentionally through the theological writings within the New Testament. And you can see why that would be useful to the LGBTQ plus community. But it is legitimately a reach to suggest that eunuchs are gay. Now, you can see why that theological language might be useful, right? Like, you can make a case there, but it is a reach to suggest that these are like men who just romantically are interested in men, or women that are romantically interested in women. Does that make sense to everyone else here?
Yeah, definitely.
I'm trying to. I want to make sure that I'm even keel on this, because do you think that Ruth and
even
Naomi,
Jesus himself addresses eunuchs in some of his speak, parables or whatever.
Yeah, right. It's from Jesus that we get this language, eunuch from birth. So, like, what the fuck does that mean?
Right.
Like, eunuch from birth. Like, it is unlikely that means someone who has had their genitals crushed from birth. That is an unlikely language. There's some like evocative language use there. It's like got something going on there. Yeah. There's not enough going on there to suggest this is most certainly a homosexual person, especially in a world that doesn't even acknowledge sexual orientation. But there is enough going on there to suggest there is meaningful rhetoric happening within these communities that can speak to alternate sexual lifestyles or maybe alternate gender expressions. Maybe there's not. There's something going on there that inquires the imagination of people, and we should speak to that, but not with too much liberties, perhaps. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's my opinion. I'm open to y'all's opinions. I'm not speaking like this is like textbook fact. I'm just like, based on these texts, here's my understanding.
I would agree.
And on that note, it's almost like 12:20, which means in Andrew's time it's like almost 1:20.
It's 1:16 right now.
Yeah, here in New York. I'm in New York. It's 1:16.
Yep. PA.
Yeah. So, I think it should probably be a good note to end on. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you
Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you.
No, yes, thank you for hopping on. Thank you, Andrew, for telling us way more about various penises than I ever anticipated when this started.
Thank you.
That's a long avian squiggle dick. I was not expecting
Squiggle
that.
dick. Squiggle dick for the win.
That's who won this debate tonight.
Yep.
Squiggle dick for the win.
Squiggle
Okay.
dick.
Squiggle dick.
All right.
I really enjoyed getting to hang out with y'all. If you ever want to like hang out again, just say the word.
Oh, I would love to anytime.
Sure.
Holla back at your girl.
Sounds good.
Awesome.
Adios.